Good morning. I want to give you an introduction about WISE and what is WISE. WISE is a coalition of organizations and individuals building resilient and hopeful communities by promoting inclusion and support for all who are affected by mental health and addiction challenges. With support from Rogers Behavioral Health, WISE implements and advances evidence-based practices for stigma reduction. People with a mental health challenges share their recovery experiences in a targeted, local, credible, and the continuous way is the best known way to reduce stigma and drives the focus of contact with those in recovery to end stigma in schools, healthcare, congregations, workplace, and wherever people interact. Why symposium, may ask? In 2021, WISE offered four virtual quarterly coalition meetings open to whoever wanted to attend. The theme was the intersection of race and mental health. The four meetings had attendance of 599 unique participants. Through the surveys following the meetings, attendees asked for the convention or the conversation around the topic not to end. In response, this symposium was planned. And as you looked at the PowerPoints that were playing last year meetings in February 2021, historical trauma, we had the speakers of Mr. Reggie Jackson, also Mr. Mark Powers. In May 2021, for developmental and family trauma, Dr. Maria Amarante and Dr. Dominique Pritchard. Also in August, trauma and education, Mr. Curtis Marshall and myself. And in November, healing generational trauma, Ms. Hetty Key. And furthermore, you see also on the slides that we have some giving voice to depression podcasts. And the podcast were as follows. For trauma recovery, Dr. Maria Amarante was the speaker. Generational trauma, Mr. Mark Powers was the speaker. Family trauma, Mr. Tony Small. And treatment trauma was Dr. Warren Braden. And furthermore, we extended our, last year intersection between race and mental health. We reenacted the blogs that were on our website, and you'll see is three, Our Mental Health Matters Too, that was still around the theme, the effects of racism and trauma on Black and Brown students in mental health, and also a matter of color. And more to come from the symposium of more blogs. So I'm going to introduce our MC today. Mr. Brooks Griffin is a motivational speaker, youth advocate, and corporate social responsibility coordinator with the 2021 NBA champions Milwaukee Bucks. In his current role, Brooks coordinates a team dedicated to addressing racial injustice and social inequities in Wisconsin, especially as they impact Black and Brown communities. Without further ado, I would like to welcome you, Mr. Brooks Griffin.
Good morning. Who we doing better than that? Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who woke up feeling cold today? I know I did. Look better than yesterday, but super excited to be here today. Let's give it up for Wise and Rogers. Let's give a round of applause. Totally. For those that are watching virtually and for those that are here in person, we're definitely excited to see you all. We're here today for a call to action. A symposium that will really look at the intersection of race and mental health. Last year, well, actually 2020, I remember in February we saw the news and said, oh, sickness is gonna come, the flu is gonna come, it's gonna be all right, it'll be gone in a week. And about 2 years later, we're still here dealing with the pandemic. But also the pandemic has shown a lot of disparities that one was already here in the community. But then also the pandemic has shown where support and where action is needed. So that's why we're here today. I remember during the planning conversations and just overall in the community's tired of talking. We know the problems, we know where the actions need to happen, but we just really need to synchronize everything together to a synchronized plan of action. So before we go into our exciting day of our panelists and speakers and presentations, I just want to kind of give some quick housekeeping notes for those that may be in attendance here in person. One, if you parked on the 16th Street parking structure, If you came with your ticket, feel free to go out into the hallway and we will reimburse you for your parking fees. If you did park on the 16th Street parking structure and did not have your ticket or left it in the car, unfortunately you would have to go to the car to come back, bring the ticket, and then enjoy that cold weather again, and so that you can have that reimbursement ticket. So super excited and appreciative of Marquette University for hosting us. Second, if you are needing to go to the restrooms during this symposium, to the right and to the left out in the hallways, you will find the bathrooms, water and restrooms. Feel free to go at your own leisure throughout the duration of this symposium. Also, just a quick run of show of kind of how the day is going to look like. We'll have some quick presentations. We'll have a super exciting panel from the distinguished leaders in the community, and they'll have an opportunity to speak on various topics as it relates to the symposium. We'll have a great presentation by Dr. Rob Smith, and then we'll have an opportunity for a break. And then if you look around, and even those online, we'll have a special time to break out groups based on the topics that the panelists will be speaking on. And from those topics, we'll really dive in to really figure out what that call to action really is. So super excited about that. And then lastly, to close, if you have your folders in front of you, I gotta kind of do it like a school day. Everybody raise your folder. Everybody raise your folder. Let me see your folders. Oh yeah, cool. If you look at the back of your packet, on the back of your folders, there's some information on that says odds and ends on the back. There's a QR code that has a survey. We definitely would love your feedback for the symposium. We would love to know your thoughts, your comments, your concerns. And for those that are digitally inclined, you can definitely go into the QR code and put your phone on there with your camera app, and then the form will pop up. For those that like paper forms more better, there are paper forms out in the hallway if that will be easier for you. Also, we would love for you to engage with us, and also for those that are online, and for those that love to be on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. If you have any TikTokers on here, there'll be 2 hashtags that we'll be using that you can use throughout your social media to really show that you're here at the Mental Health Symposium today. The first hashtag is one story at a time. And we believe that's definitely the way that our communities will get better, but then also where recovery can be strengthened. So hashtag one story at a time. And then another hashtag we'll use is WISE, MHS 2022. Again, that's WISE, MHS 2022. So throughout this symposium, if there's anything that came into your mind or anything that piqued your interest or a key takeaway that you would like to share into the world, please use the hashtags one story at a time or WISE MHS 2022. We feeling good this morning?
Yes.
Oh, see that? I'm giving y'all the energy. We feeling good this morning? Yes. Cool. So there was a story, right? There was a story of a donkey. And this donkey was old. This donkey was fragile. This donkey was basically useless. And this donkey had someone that had to take care of him, and we're just gonna call him Farmer for today. All right? So this farmer had a donkey, and he saw this old, useless, beat-up donkey. And he decided, you know what? I'm just gonna throw him down the well. So this farmer took this old donkey and he threw him down the well, and he looked down into this well and saw the old donkey there, and he realized the donkey was still alive. He didn't do what he had to do. So he turned around and got the biggest shovel. He got the biggest shovel that he could find in his shed, and he took the shovel and walked over to the well. And when he walked over to the well, he took his shovel and put it in the ground and threw it on top of that donkey. He grabbed the shovel again and threw it on top of that donkey. It took him all day. It took him all night of just And for every load of dirt that this farmer dropped on this donkey, you just heard that poor donkey screaming at the bottom of the well, and I want everybody just to tap into your imagination and just imagine what the donkey could sound like. Right? And this farmer's like, oh man, I gotta continue to do. And for every load of dirt that this farmer was putting on this donkey started to get quieter and quieter. Sooner or later, it got quiet. So the farmer looked at his pile of dirt and his shovel, and he got the last piece of dirt and threw it on the donkey. But to the farmer's surprise, every time that the farmer put the load of dirt on the donkey was on the bottom of the well, shaking it off and stepping up. Again, for every load, I'm telling you, all day, all night, the farmer was throwing loads of dirt on this donkey. And the donkey just sat there, shook it off, and stepped up. And at the end of the night, that last load, when he shook it up, he stepped outside the well. And the moral of that story is, so many times, individuals in our community can feel like that donkey. There's the world throwing dirt on them. Their own family members are throwing dirt on them. But when they look internally and see the challenges that they may have, rather if it's mental health, rather if it's the effects of the pandemic, they feel that load of dirt coming on them. And how many of us, how many of our clients, how many of those that we work day to day feels like that donkey? Feels like they can't turn, feels like they can't go right, feels like they can't get out of the well that they're in, until they realize the best way to recover is to shake it off and take a step up. But it's tough. It's tough when the dirt is coming on you. It's tough when the person that's supposed to care for you, i.e. farmer, is the one with the shovel on it. It's tough when the one that's supposed to care is mom. It's tough when the one that's supposed to care is teacher. It's tough when the one that's supposed to care is psychologist. It's tough when you put your trust in someone that you just have to shake it off and step back up. See, I'm excited to be invited here today because I felt like that donkey. See, my story started in 2011, Easter Sunday. It's a day that I'll never forget. I played basketball for George Karl. So any Bucks fans in here, you remember George Karl? Raise your hand. Okay, I love it. Had the opportunity to play with George Karl for his AAU team, and I was 17, 18 years old, thinking I made it. Had the opportunity to play under NBA coach and to play with NBA players and just to make that way out of Milwaukee, right? But Easter Sunday hit, AAU weekend. For those that know AAU, it's where students and young people from across the country come and play basketball. Their passion, their love to really take that next step to collegiate basketball, hopefully to make it to professional ball. But it was Easter Sunday for me. And I was on the hems of just getting in between my mom and the dad arguing. Hey, Brooks, tell your dad this. Okay. Hey, tell your mama I said this. Okay, mom. Hey, okay, I already know. And the pull left and right and left and right and left and right was too much. And I started to see a lot of children around my school, around my community, they didn't have those problems. But it wasn't the problems of the left and right, but it was the inner pull in me. I didn't have the words to name depression. I didn't have the words to name anxiety until Easter Sunday, when I decided that the best way for my parents to feel my pain, the best way for the community to feel my pain was to get the biggest knife in the kitchen drawer. And to go wake my mom up in the middle of the night and say, Mom, you didn't see me hurt. Now you have to watch me hurt. And I took the knife and I shoved it in my stomach. And I said, now, Mom, what are you going to do now? But thank God for the we have apartments, duplex here, duplex here, duplex there, duplex there. And I'm just hearing stairs, people running up the stairs, and Brooks. But thank God for the mental health complex that allowed me to open my eyes to see caring staff that were there, even when our family couldn't have been. I learned the supports of social emotional learning. I learned the supports of talking. But I've also learned how to name the depression and then the anxiety. See, the story starts for me there, but I believe we all can look back in our childhood. We all can look back in our past, and we know we all can heal from our past. And while we're here to talk about recovery, I wanted to put my story out. To know that whatever sectors, whatever jobs, whatever titles you may have, you could have been helping me, a young kid just like me. No matter if I was in the face of a dream, no matter if I felt like I was almost there, I depended on you. And I feel that's why we're all here, because we all have a piece of the pie to help each other heal from their past. So everybody say heal.
Healed.
All right, say it like you mean. Everybody say healed.
Healed.
So once I went to the mental health complex and got out of there, mind you, I got on a Friday, so I was trying to wait till that Monday. I'm writing the notes, I'm doing the thank you notes, I'm writing my mom sorry letters, I'm making new friends, I'm learning magic tricks, I'm eating new things that I never ate. It was different. But I knew leaving out of those doors, I had to walk. I had to talk in a new, different way. I had to worry about the kids at school that knew I had to be there. I had to talk to my team and show them and tell them why I just didn't show up to the game without no announcement. Again, depression and anxiety wanted to stay at the forefront. But I remember one person in the complex that reminded me and said, Brooks, in order to recover, in order to deal with, in order to navigate the challenges of your mental health, I want you to walk into your purpose. If you came into the symposium today, I want to let you know that you have a purpose. Each and every one of you at every table has a purpose. Rather, if you can name your purpose, rather if you're in the process of finding your purpose, you have a purpose. But the same individuals that we strive to on a day-to-day to help heal, I also encourage us to help find their purpose. See, I really give credit to the youth and family serving field that I served for over 15 years in organizations such as COA Youth and Family Centers and Safe and Sound, and working with organizations such as the African American Breastfeeding Network, because even in my youthful age, even though I still kind of consider myself young, the resources that I was challenged to invest into young people were the same resources that I needed myself. When dealing with communities from marginalized backgrounds or black and brown communities, when we're having conversations around social emotional learning, when we're having conversations around ethics, when we're having conversations around feelings and the effects of mental health challenges, as much as I had the title as teacher, as much as I had the title of youth worker, I also had the title of student. And the conversations that I've learned and the insights that young people and families have brought up, especially during the pandemic, I can't help to remember the words that the individual told me at the complex, that you have to walk with your purpose. And with the purpose, it starts with the mindset. With the purpose, it starts with the habits. With the purpose, it starts with the decisions. And it's the small wins that allow me to continue to walk here to where I am today. So if we can understand that we need to heal from our past, then we can help ourselves, we can help our clients, but then we can also help that one individual walk into and grow into their purpose. So everybody say heal.
Heal.
Everybody say grow.
Grow.
See, the last step of my story is that as you see now, is to lead with love. I love to ask the question, especially when I'm speaking with young people, what's your definition of love? What's your definition of love? Let's just do it for fun. Anybody got a definition of love? Definition of love. It could be 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. What's your definition? Throw it out, scream it out.
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. Anybody else? Patience. Anybody else?
Connection.
Connection. Accountability. Kindness. Caring. Vulnerability. Unconditional. Love. See, I grew up in a loving environment. Well, Brex, how you grew up in a loving department? Didn't you say you got pulled? Didn't you just say you were at the mental health complex? Didn't you just say that you had all this? Once I understood what love was and where it started, I knew where I had to control. See, love started with me, and I realized that the world has so many individuals that didn't feel love. Someone asked, hey, Bricks, are you always positive? I said, no. I know someone just needs love. Someone just needs the someone just needs the energy that they can make it. But it starts with leaders. It starts with those that are in the organizations that you may be here representing today. It may start from the family. It may start from your last name to say, I'm standing as a father. I'm standing as a mother. I'm standing for my community. See, when we can heal from our past so that we can understand and grow into our purpose, it's then that we can lead with love. I know we look at outcomes. I know we look at statistics. I know we look at the data, and it's very important that it can inform the work that we do. But I'm here to encourage. I'm here to place a call to action to say if we're not putting love at the forefront of our work, if we're not putting love at the forefront of our discussions, when we go out into our breakout groups and we talk about the trainings of police officers, when we talk about the reimbursement rates, when we're talking about strengthening resources, are we bringing love to the table? Understanding that connection, understanding that care, understanding that vulnerability, understanding everything that we named can go back to helping individuals heal from their past. See, we're here because of love. We're here because our purpose, but we're here also because of our past. And while we may look at our past from 2 years and it gives us an even playing field where we can all say, yep, we're affected by COVID, I challenge us to dig deeper. Because COVID just brought to light what was already here. It brought to light the feelings that just were at the bottom. It brought to our mind that donkey that felt like the world was pouring dirt on him. I would tell that donkey, stay away from that farmer, first of all. So that's how you heal from the past. But grow into that purpose. Because you do have a purpose, even though you may seem old and useless, even though you may be burnt out, even though you may be virtually burnt out. But we need you, donkey, so that you can help lead this world with love. Because without you, then the call to action can never happen. So again, thank you so much for allowing me just to share that story. And I wanted to share that story just to set the stage of why we're here today, to really look at a call to action of and the intersection of mental health, of race and mental health. But before I turn over our event over to our panelists, I really want to give some shout outs and acknowledgments to those that helped put this symposium together. I know some are watching online and some are in person, so feel free, if you're here in the space or if you're online and your video's on, feel free to wave. Let's give a shout out to Dr. Ricardo Anderson, the chair of WISE, Ellie Jarvie, Mary Madden, yeah, we can give it up, Barbara Moser, Mary Neubauer, Mark W. Paulus, and Mary K. Wagner. Let's give it a round of applause for our WISE Executive Committee. Cool. And then let's also give a round of applause, and I'll read their names. These are the individuals that were a part of the planning committee for the symposium. Dr. Rob Smith, Reggie Jackson, Hetty Keith, Pastor Walter Lanier, Dr. Ricardo Anderson, Jessica Langille, Sharon Degrasse, Sue Dicks, and Allison Wolf. Let's give them a round of applause as well. And then lastly, just want to give some additional thanks to Lakita Caldwell from Raising the Bar, Jolisa Castillo, it's good to see you, it's good to see you. Jamal Smith from the City of Milwaukee Office of Violence Prevention, and Hinckley Productions. Let's give it a round of applause for them. Well, I'm super excited. This is something that I've been waiting for last night. I couldn't sleep because I'm like, man, I just can't wait to hear. I was reading the bios from everyone. I'm just like, oh yeah, we got a great panel. We got a great panel, and really how this panel is going to go, and I'll introduce each one soon. There'll be certain topics that each panelist will address, and you can also see around the room from 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the topics. So we have strengthening resources, diversity in the mental health workforce, disparity of reimbursement rates, and training of police officers and first responders. So first, for the strengthening resources, I'll read their bios just real short, just to kind of give you a quick glimpse of who we have today. We have Reggie Jackson to my left. He's a nationally heralded independent scholar and much sought after speaker, researcher, writer, and consultant to the media on race relations. He is the co-founder of Nurturing Diversity Partners, which provides education, training, and consulting services that foster diversity, inclusion, and equity. Let's give it up for Reggie Jackson.
Thank you all so much. It's great to be here. Thank you, Brooks, for that. So I'm going to talk about strengthening resources by sharing a couple stories. Some of you may know that I used to be a teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools. I was a special education teacher. And I want to tell you the story of two boys that taught me something based on the reality of their lived experiences, that taught me what we have to do as people that are people who care about others, how we have to maintain a positive mindset, even when it seems impossible. We all know that here in Milwaukee, we always hear about the bad things, right? We can't pick up the newspaper, we can't turn on the news, we can't be in an elevator without hearing negative things about Milwaukee, all of the challenges, all of the negative things that are going on. And when I'm in those spaces and I hear people saying those things, I always say, but listen, there's another side to that coin. There are people that are working very hard. There's an army of people in Milwaukee that are working hard to help people that are in need. But we don't hear about these individuals. We don't hear about their organizations. They're kind of hidden from all of us, right? So what I want us to do is to learn how to uplift them. And I want to share with you the story of these two students. Both students were named Michael. And these were both 8th grade students. And I had a different relationship with each of the Michaels. One was at one school I worked at, one was at a different school I worked at a few years later. Both of these young men were in a position where they really, really had a wonderful relationship with their mothers, and both Michaels lost their mothers. The one Michael was in a terrible car accident. He lost his mother and his younger sister. He's the only one who survived the car accident. The other Michael was a young man who always talked about his mom. Every single day he said something to me about his mom and how well his mom treated him. And he lost his mother to cancer. So as both of these young men were struggling with the loss of their mothers, they were in need of care. They were in need of care that I couldn't provide. So what I had to do is to find out, how do I get these young men in a space where I can put them in front of people that can help them get through this tragedy of losing their mothers. And both of them kind of dealt with it in a different way. And one of the sad things is one of the Michaels, the one who lost his mom in a car accident, his father couldn't handle the loss of his wife and his daughter. So what he started to do was he started to kind of drift away from his son. So now Michael started to feel like he was alone. He didn't even have the support of his dad anymore, and that made the situation even worse than it had been before. And eventually he started to show signs of just like not caring about life at all anymore. We were at a school where the students were required to wear a uniform. His uniforms were just dirty all the time. He would go weeks, months without even having his uniform shirt and pants washed. And we literally would have to, some of the teachers at the school would literally buy new uniform shirts and pants for Michael. And the ones that he had that were dirty, we would take those and we'd have washer and dryer at the school. We would literally wash his uniforms for him because the other students started to notice and started to tease him. This is what, middle school students, they can be very, very just hurtful to their peers. And eventually, though, this Michael started to get care. We reached out as a team to get people to talk to Michael, to give him the resources, not only for himself, but also for his dad to help them get out of this situation. It was very traumatizing. And I learned that over the course of that school year, that Michael started to kind of come back around. He started to be himself again. And it was because of all of the people that reached out. All of the people that were there in the caring community to help Michael out. Michael was able to slowly but surely recover. And people saw that, but they didn't see this army of people that were helping Michael recover. They didn't know who these people were. And I think Milwaukee is like that. We see the challenges Milwaukee has. We see all of the traumatized members of the community, but we don't see this army of people that are there to help them out. And I want us to acknowledge, I have a spreadsheet here of organizations that are helping organizations. I mean, it's 2 pages long. It's printed in really, really small fonts. It shows me that there are so many people, so many organizations that are here to help us. We have to acknowledge them. We have to shine a light on them. We have to raise awareness of them so that people know when they're in need, these are the organizations, these are the people that are here to help you. These are the people that care enough to spend their time doing this work for you. Now, this other Michael, when he lost his mother, he was really hurt because his relationship with his mother was something that kept him kind of very steady in life. But this is the thing about that Michael, and I love this kid. He gave me probably the best gift I've ever had from a student. When he graduated from 8th grade, he gave me a really nice briefcase. And he said, Mr. Jackson, you were the best teacher I've ever had. I love you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you for all that you've done for me. But when he was going through that period where he had lost his mother, despite all the trauma he was dealing with, despite the difficulties that his family was dealing with, this is what Michael said to me every single day. And it let me understand, like, man, despite what Michael is going through, this is what his mindset is every day. How can I not have the same mindset? This is what Michael said to me every single day. At the end of class, when he's leaving the class, he would always say to me, Mr. Jackson, I hope you have the best day ever today. He said that every single day. I hope you have the best day ever today, Mr. Jackson. And that was how he lived his life. Despite all the things that were going on with Michael, he tried to have the best day ever, knowing that that was the only way forward for him that would provide him with what he needed to be able to deal with the trauma that he was dealing with. And so I want to share that message with Milwaukee. I want us to, despite all of the challenges, all of the difficulties we have, I want us to understand that there are so many people that care. We don't hear about them. We don't see them on the news. We don't read about them in the paper. We read social media stuff. We don't hear about these organizations. But I want to pump up the volume on who these individuals and organizations are. I want to challenge each and every one of you that are in that caring profession, that are in those spaces, that know who these people are, and many of you are those people yourselves. I want you to think yourselves in this way. We see all of these movies about superheroes, right? Batman, Spider-Man, all these. I just watched Batman last night. I didn't like it. But anyway, the reason I didn't like it is because I want people to be seen as superheroes that aren't the people that look like superheroes. I want people who are the superheroes in our community who don't have a cape on to be seen and thought of in that way. I want those in the helping community to be our new superheroes. I want us to shine a light on those people, those organizations, to advocate for them to get the resources they need to do the work that they're doing that is so important behind the scenes. That's who I want us to call our superheroes in Milwaukee. And I think if we do that, we'll have a much more optimistic perspective about where we're moving as a city, as a community. It's very, very easy to get caught up in the negativity, but there are so many positive things happening. You know, this great panel that I'm on, this great organization that's putting this on, all of you all that are here, I know, because I see this every day, I see people in Milwaukee that are striving really hard to help everybody to make Milwaukee a healthy place. And I want us to stop being so humble and give ourselves a pat on the back sometimes. Let people know that we're here. We want to help. Stop being so pessimistic and be more optimistic, because there is an army of superheroes that are doing this work. And I want us to be able to strengthen the resources we have by talking about those resources that are available. I want us to give a shout out to those people that we work with. Give us a shout out to the organizations we're a part of. Give a shout out to those organizations that you work in collaboration with, so that people can begin to see that, man, there is a lot of help. Now, I could go on for a long time talking about strengthening resources, but I think I'm going to pass it on to Brenda Wesley to talk about an organization that she wants to share with you some information about.
Cool. Before Brenda goes into her speech, I would like to give her bio as well. Brenda Wesley developed an African American outreach program, ACTS, which stands for Access, Support, and Knowledge, in 2007, in response to troubling signs of growing mental health challenges in the African American community. ASK is designed to educate the community and work to provide access to care for those who need it most. Brenda sits on various community committees as part of her advocacy work as well. So let's give it up for Brenda Wesley.
Thank you. Good morning. And thank you, Brooks, for your story and for your just being out in the community and sharing your story. I think it's very important. Before I start, just to kind of introduce you to things that I have done. How do we open our community to the secrets of mental health and mental illness? We talk about it. We start a conversation. We tell the stories. We tell the stories of strength and resiliency and happiness, but we also tell the stories of rejection and sadness and stigma. And everything that I do, I acknowledge who I work for, and I work for those that don't have a voice, those that live with a mental health disorder, but I also have to acknowledge my son who lives with a severe mental health disorder, as well as my sister that also lived with a severe mental health disorder and addiction, and she lost her life to addiction last year. So when we tell the stories, we have to be honest about what we say. So today's symposium is about race and mental health. My son is Black, and he's a male. He's been incarcerated, and he lives with a severe mental health diagnosis. So to go out to tell his story, to acknowledge his life and the life of those that live with a mental illness, and that's impacted by mental health. So that is one of the reasons why I wrote a play called Pieces in My Own Voice, which I worked with Wise and Rogers, that we actually got the production evidence-based. There was research that was done on the production. And so with my journey is that we also went into the schools with this production, because I truly feel that arts is a way that we can open people up to talk about things that we normally would not talk about. So the production is a collaboration of those that live with a mental health disorder that have been traumatized, or family members as well, and we use music and dance and art, but then also we talk about the clinical side of mental health disorder. So that just kind of brings me to when we talk about strengthening resources, because we went out to various communities and schools to talk about what is it that you need, what is it that we can help you with, and to strengthen those resources. And I truly believe that we need to educate and we need to make people aware that it's okay to talk about challenges. It's okay to talk about trauma. It's okay to say that I have a loved one that lives with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression. It's okay. Let's have a conversation about it, which had brought me to how can I help change the narrative? Because we do have to change the narrative of mental health and mental illness. I always say is that mental illness and mental health is the last frontier that we can openly and honestly make fun of people. And we still use words like crazy, nuts, lunatic. So sometimes when we talk about strengthening resources, it actually begins with us. It actually begins with how we see those individuals that we provide services for. You know, when we look at stigma, are we looking at a black female, a black male? Do we understand where they're at? Are we looking at race? Are we looking at the illness itself? So these are things that we have to say within ourselves. How do we strengthen these resources? So I was named to the Milwaukee County Mental Health Board 8 years ago. And I wanted to be a part of trying to strengthen our system and to change our system. But we have to be diligent about what is not working. So what is not working, then we have to figure out how do we plug those holes? What is it that we need to do so people do not fall in between the cracks? Sitting on the Milwaukee County Mental Health Board is that we oversee millions and millions of dollars, behavioral health dollars, that is going into the system. There were things that we talked about and I talked about on the board is that how do we strengthen agencies of color that were not getting contracts through behavioral health because they could not expand their capacity because we were looking at the RFP process. So we had to look at how are we going to change that? What do we need to do? We need to talk about it as well. What is the quality of what's happening in our communities? And I'm glad that Brooks had a wonderful experience at the complex, but there's a lot of people that were not having a great experience at the complex. And so if you're not having a great experience, then we need to look at quality. What type of quality was coming out of the hospital? What do we need to do? So we had to talk about those challenges with behavior health, and even with the system, the way that we're changing it now, where we're pushing services out into the community. We have a new private hospital that will be opening because the hospital, Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex, has been privatized. So the complex will be going away, and we do have a hospital system. We will also have a new emergency center, and we're pushing services out into the community. But who is going to have oversight? We have boards, and we have boards of directors that I always say that the suits sit at the top because I'm grassroots. We have the suits at the top that really don't understand what's happening in the realm of behavioral health. So my term on the board will be ending May 1st. So sitting as chair of the Community Engagement Committee, I have gotten the blessing from the board that we will start a community advisory council. And with this community advisory council, I tell the individuals that will be sitting on this council, we will have power. We will have probably more power, and I will have more power being off the board because I will have the community behind me, and we will oversee what is happening at Granite Hills. That's the new hospital. We will oversee what is happening with the community in the emergency center. We will have oversight of what's happening in our community as well. And all the changes that being on the board, and I have to acknowledge a fellow board member, as Mary Neubauer is here, is that we have worked tireless to expand the capacity of resources and how do we strengthen these resources as well. But one thing that we have to do is that it begins with you. How do you see the clients that you are servicing? Are you looking at race? Are you looking at trauma? Are you looking at male, female? We have so many different issues that we have to deal with in our community. So I challenge you today that as we are building capacity, as we are strengthening the services and strengthening a lot of these agencies that were not able to build the capacity in their agency because you're out there doing great work. But again, always check yourself at the door. And what is it that I need to do differently? Because my son and maybe my sister have sat in front of you for many, many, many years, and what is the impact that you are going to provide to help someone and not to treat someone punitively, but to do no harm? Thank you.
Great, great. Strengthening resources. If you weren't on your phone, and if you have opportunity to go on social media, use the hashtag one story at a time, or hashtag WISE MHS 2022. There are some great key takeaways that I've heard. You said, don't be humble, right? Be proud of the resources that we have, especially in a city that's often called silo, right? Where we're over-resourced, but pull it away, right? Let's be proud of the resources that we have to be able to come together. And Brenda, you said strengthening resources begins with us, right? We necessarily don't have to look externally. We can realize that we are the biggest resource, and sometimes I like to tell myself in the head it's we source, right? If we looked at we, and to kind of see the power of strength together. So I'm super excited and appreciative of you both. For those that are online watching and for those that are in person, we're a little ahead of schedule, and at first we weren't going to allow questions or response to come after each panelist, but looking at the time, I think we have a few minutes to allow for a question or two for either Reggie Jackson or Brenda Wesley. If you would like to come either to the mic in the front, if you would like to have a question that relates to strengthening resources. Also, for those that are online, I believe you have the capability to ask a question in the chat, and we'll have someone look at the chat as well too. So is there anyone that would like to have any questions for either Reggie Jackson or Brenda Wesley as it relates to strengthening resources? All right, here we go. Let's give it up, let's give it up, let's give it up. Oh, I'll help you out.
I'll say it real loud. Getting on that community council, if the community has ideas of who would be great representatives, is it time yet to let you know some ideas of people who would be great for that community council?
We just established the council, I would say, a couple of days ago. So we do have a few members already. So if you are interested at some point, get in touch with WISE because we have to establish onboarding. And this will be also open to public comment as well, so you would be able to hear the meetings, and we have a standing agenda that the community will be able to speak at these meetings to let us know exactly what we need to be addressing when it comes to community concerns as well. So if you are interested, if you can get in touch with, I would say, WISE, and let us know of your interest, and then as we are growing, then I can reach out as well.
Perfect, perfect. I see Hannah running to the mic.
I'm just going to speed walk, I won't run. Good morning. We did have a question online, and it was just, is there a place that we can either purchase or see pieces of the play online or in person?
As a matter of fact, we are, Mary, can you address that? Thank you, because Mary has information. We're going to be doing a couple of the vignettes at the King Center next week, but we are in the midst, because of the pandemic, we have just kind of closed shop. So we need to get We need to get funding, and we need to continue to go into the schools as well as the community. I also have an adult production and a youth production that we go into the schools, which is a half-an-hour production, where we actually get the kids talking about what they're going through. Is very, very exciting, especially with youth. And, but we have gotten pushback. So when we talk about strengthening resources, we got pushback from the school system and trying to define what is important. But again, if our kids are not strong and they're dealing with anxiety and depression, then how are we going to get their grades and scores up unless we are addressing their mental health challenges? And we have been doing this work for, I would say, 10 years. Pieces have been out for 10 years. So Mary, can you just kind of let everyone know where we're at?
Sure. County Executive David Crawley is doing mental health moments out in the community. So Tuesday, April 26th, from 2 to 4 p.m., he will be at the
King Center.
King Center, the community center, and at 2:30, there'll be several vignettes of pieces being performed. So if you want to see several vignettes of pieces, you want to be at the King Center by 2:30 on Tuesday, April 26th. And we may also be performing in May. You can go to the website for Milwaukee County and find information about the King Center on Tuesday, April 26th. It won't say anything specifically about pieces right now. It'll just give a flyer about the county executive's Healthy Mental Health Day, but we'll be hopefully adding something in there, but you guys have the heads up.
Thank you, Mary.
Perfect, perfect. Let's give another round of applause for Brenda and Reggie. Great, great. And, you know, I'm just super excited about the opportunity later on to get into the breakout sessions. And, you know, if there's anything that you had in your mind, right, or you wanted to ask, the breakout sessions would definitely be a great time to really build upon. And I know we'll have breakout sessions in person and for those online as well. And looking forward to, you know, what will be coming out of those breakout sessions. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it over now to Dr. Maria Amarante, which will speak about diversity in the mental health workforce. Dr. Maria Amarante is the CEO and founder of the Multicultural Trauma and Addiction Treatment Center of Wisconsin, located in Wauwatosa. Since the agency opened its doors in November of 2018, it has provided pro bono services for those impacted by the social injustices in our communities. She has over 20 years of counseling experience with a wide range of patients in a variety of treatment settings. Her love of her Latino roots and growing up in the urban community motivates her to maintain close ties to Paterson, New Jersey. She visits there often and has worked with the group Teens to Be Heard. She also volunteered at various events that have focused on encouraging teenagers living in Paterson to pursue their dreams. Without further ado, let's give it up for Dr. Maria Amarante.
Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning. I just want to start by saying every time that I do a presentation or I'm invited to sit at the table, if you will, I listen to the parts of the bio that's highlighted, and let me tell you, I am so happy to be from Paterson, New Jersey, okay? Like, I represent Paterson everywhere I go. It's who I am. Before I'm a clinician, before I'm anything, I feel like representing my city is where it's at. So, Paterson. But, so back to talking about sitting at the table. Brooks, as you were sharing your story with us, I began to tear up, and I was just thinking about your experience and the magnitude of what you experienced and the individuals that stood in the place of your healing. And I just started to reflect on my journey, being born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey, and living here in Wisconsin for approximately 12 years, and the honor that I have. And I know that Reggie talked about, you know, not being humble, and I can't help but be humble to be at the table. to sit in a place and to think about the fact that my words actually matter, to be in this season of my life where I can sit before an audience that actually cares about what I have to say. I am truly humbled. So I just thank you, all of you, for allowing me to be a part of the conversation. Thank you. My conversation today is going to focus around workforce diversity. When I think about workforce diversity, I think about the similarities and differences as they relate to staff members on our team. And I think about the similarities and differences amongst age, gender, religion, physical abilities and disabilities, sexual orientation. I think about language, not only language as far as like if the individuals on our team are able, do we speak Spanish, English, Italian, Chinese, whatever language, but I also think about language style, communication style, and embracing that style, and how when we have staff members on our team that are similar and different, how does that impact not only the team, but how does it impact our clients? When our clients are pursuing mental health and wanting to address their mental health issues, what are they looking for? I'm imagining that they're looking for someone that looks like them, someone that can relate to them, someone who can help them feel gotten, someone who's not going to put up a wall and have them climb yet over another hurdle so that their story can be heard and so that healing can take place. So today I invite all of you to consider looking at workforce diversity in the mental health realm through that lens. When I think about diversity in the workforce as it relates to mental health, I also think about inclusion. What good is having diversity if we don't have inclusion? And I think about how, imagine yourself being invited to a party, and your role is to invite individuals from all different walks of life. And you did an amazing job. You invited them, you put it out there, and everyone accepted your invitation. Yet these individuals attend this party, and guess what? You're not playing the music that gets them to go on that dance floor. Inclusion does that. Inclusion invites individuals not only to come to the table, but to have a voice. Inclusion invites individuals to go on that dance floor, and you learn from each other, and you might take a step to the left, to the right, front, back, and you just mingle with one another, and you learn, and you impact. Being in the room is not enough. How are the individuals in that room able to have a voice and to impact not only the individuals that are a part of the team, but those that we're servicing? I want to also focus on behavior attributes that individuals that truly embody inclusion have. And I want you to consider that when you have inclusion and you embrace inclusion, you think about whose responsibility is it? It's everyone's responsibility. It's not only the CEO or the chairperson of the diversity committee. It's everyone's responsibility. And when you think about responsibility, I want you to think about, okay, so what is the action step here? Am I just going to talk about wanting to have a diverse team, or am I going to, invite individuals to come to the table? Am I going to ask my team members to bring conversations to our weekly team meetings? One of my pet peeves is when I think about my education and the multicultural courses that I took. And every time I think about the syllabi and even the interns that come on board on my team, and we have conversations about multicultural competency. Where did you learn about what it means to be you, what it means to be different? And then I think about how the multicultural courses are so, they take place in the summertime, and everything is packed in. And I think about Black American History Month, right? February. And then everyone's like all sensitive about the topic in February. We need to think about inclusion every day of the year. We need to think about inclusion and having conversations every week. Include it in your agenda. And if it's not on the agenda, if you're truly embracing inclusion, you're going to bring it up. You're going to raise your hand. You're going to say, hey, let's talk about this. There was a client who came into the agency, and our policies and procedures called us to respond a certain way. However, this client's needs were just a little different. Let's talk about maybe creating an additional policy or procedure to support that client. I also think about marginalized populations. And I remember Brooks, you did a good job. You were warming me up back here, okay? I think about how, you know, in social media, the individuals that make the loudest noise get the most attention. And I also think about those who are unable to make the loudest noise, who they want to be heard. They're silent and want to be heard. They want someone to take the time to pay attention to the fact that they may not have the advocacy that is needed. And what is it going to take for you to tap into yourself and say, okay, let's talk about the uncomfortable. Let's bring up conversations in our weekly team meetings, or let's bring up conversations amongst us that address topics that are not on social media, that are not getting the Facebook likes every day. And why not? I think the reason why not is because not enough individuals care enough or are even aware enough to bring it to the table. So let's do our homework. I want to move to the other point when I talk about workforce, diversity in the workforce as it relates to mental health. Brenda, you did such a good job talking about, putting it out there. What are we doing? And educating the community on what we're doing. And I'm like, Brenda's warming me up too. Thank you, Brenda, because I'm thinking, I remember when COVID was a big thing. And one of my staff members, Brigetta Wilson, said, Dr. A, are you going to go on your website and put just put it out there to the public that, the Multicultural Trauma and Addiction Treatment Center of Wisconsin, we're standing this way, and this is how we're going to support the community? And I stopped and I thought to myself, when you say something, you better be about it. So what are you going to say? What are you going to tell the community that the agency is doing to account for mental health, to address the mental health needs of our community, despite the fact that we have all of these mandates, yet people still need healing? There's people out here who are still dealing with depression in silence. There's individuals who are victims of domestic violence in silence. And what is the agency going to do now that we have COVID, just having all of these impacts on how we deliver our services? And I chose not to put something on our website, yet when I think about the multicultural component of who we are, I bring it up every week. Every supervision, we have supervision today at 1 o'clock. We'll be talking about something that relates to diversity, something that relates to inclusion. We'll be talking about how is it that the lack of, we need more males in the field. I only have 2 male clinicians on my team. I feel that I am lacking the community by not having more males part of, of my team. When I think about the diversity of my interns, let me tell you something. I'm going to clap for myself. I'm going to tell you why. When I think about my team, honey, I have Latino, I have Asian, I have African American, I have individuals who are identified as being gay, lesbian. Don't play with me. I know that in order for me to be able to provide a service to my community, my staff has to. The community demands that my staff look like them, and we sound like them, we talk like them, we can relate to them. And how can we relate to them if we don't even encompass the multicultural fiber that represents who we're servicing? I know that I'm running out of time. I have a couple of points. I also want to talk about action is louder than words. And this is where I transition and I ask you to consider. All of you did an amazing job today. You woke up, you freshened up, you look good. If I walk to every table, I'm sure you smell good too, right? And you know what? Some of you are here because your job asked you, like, you know what, do you want to go to this thing? They're talking about this topic. Oh, sure, I'll go. What? Does that mean after the presentation today, I could go home? Whatever it is the reason why you're here, I'll tell you what, I know that there's more. There's more than just you were able to walk away from the office today. I know that each of you have a purpose. I know this. I know that because of the field that we're in, we're here to service to service humanity. I know that all of you have your own calling. I know this. I don't have to know you individually, but I know. And I want to call you. I'm inviting you to call you to be responsible, to walk in the purpose of why you were chosen to serve in this very field. We could have been anything else, but we were called to service humanity. And I ask that when we go out into these breakout rooms or groups, that you talk about it, say it. Say it, because when you talk about it, guess what? You're going to be held accountable. And then when you say it, whatever it is that you are committing to, whatever action step that you're committing to, I put out business cards on the table, and I'm asking you to invite me to support you. I want to be your ally, not because it sounds good. I want to be your ally because I know the impact of having a group of individuals doing the work together. And I thank you for your time today.
I love it, I love it, I love it. She said it's not enough just to be in the room. It's not even enough just to sit at the table. But we have to make sure that inclusion is always at the forefront of what we do, how we invite. And I think about the hashtag, if you all aren't on Facebook, Twitter, social media, shameless plug, put in, hashtag one story at a time. And, even to hear your story as a Patterson girl, even though, us Milwaukeeans, we may have a little battle, but we definitely appreciate you as well, too, just to really bring your heart, your passion, and then to lead by example for our community as well, too. So let's give another round of applause for Dr. Maria Amaranto. Perfect. Look, I'll tell you, it's a great panel. We're hearing so far about strengthening resources and what does it take into a community to really strengthen those resources for our community. We heard a little bit about diversity in the workforce as it relates to mental health and how we can make our mental health workforce more diverse. Is tapping into more men? Is it being more that multicultural fiber? I wrote that down on my notes as well, too. So I might have to go on Facebook, put some hashtags on, and let them know how great this symposium is today. But super excited about this next panelist that will be speaking about the disparity of reimbursement rates. And I'll just pause right here just to, like I said, if bathrooms are either to the right or to the left. If you ever need to go step out and go to the bathroom, you feel free to do that as well, too, as well as coffees and snacks and breakfast is in the back of the room as well. Well, back to the bio. Thomasina Jenkins is a clinical assistant professor and social work field liaison in the social work department at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She earned her MSW from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee while participating in the Title V Child Welfare Program and completed postgraduate certificates in trauma counseling and AODA clinical supervision. She is a licensed clinical social worker responsible for teaching field seminars and overseeing field placements for community-based mental health and substance abuse treatment programs, outpatient clinics, and medical settings. Let's give it up for Thomasina Jenkins.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm standing here so I can see the PowerPoint. This presentation is a little technical, so I can't, just talk naturally like I would, but we are going to insert some natural conversation. So first of all, good morning. I am excited to be here. This, for me, and maybe some of you, is the first time out virtually, well, not virtually, first time out in person gathering to talk about important issues. And I would like to give a shout out to all the students in the room and all the students joining us online. I do have a passion for students, and I will say that I consider it, like Dr. Amarante said, I consider it an honor to be part of this panel, to be before you today, and I consider it an honor every day to have the opportunity to pour into the future of the behavioral health workforce. Students in social work, studying the clinical part of social work and the advocacy part of social work, two components that are vital in behavioral health. So I'm going to be talking about disparities in behavioral health reimbursement rates. And next. Okay, thank you. So here's the scope of the issue. You may wonder, how does this fit in? There is a direct connection between client-patient access to behavioral health, which includes mental health and substance abuse services, and provider reimbursement. In spite of the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Act of 2008, unfortunately, there continues to be disparities in reimbursement rates for behavioral health providers compared to medical providers. So if we have any medical providers in the room, I do want to acknowledge that you all have a battle to fight as well. But behavioral health providers are reimbursed at a lower rate. So let me break that down just a little bit, that first statement about the comparison, and of course we'll talk about it more in the breakout rooms. When Brooks shared his story, one thing that came through my mind, first of all, I had to refrain from crying, because it really touches my heart when people are trying to get access to behavioral health services, because it doesn't always go well because of all the barriers, such as the ones we're discussing today. But I thought if Brooks' journey took a different turn and he was stopped at the door because he didn't have the right insurance, or the organization that he went to, they felt that their providers weren't reimbursed a rate that would enable them to deliver those services, the whole process would have been shut down at that point. And unfortunately, a lot of that is happening today. Reimbursement rates are set by each insurance company, and they vary by state. They also vary by provider license type and the provider network status. So there's different statuses even within the insurance networks. Next, please. So the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Act of 2008, that is a federal act, and the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Act requires that behavioral health benefits, mental health and substance abuse disorder benefits are covered by insurance plans. So first of all, they need to be covered, and they are to be treated equally with medical surgical benefits. So I remember when I first started in the field, that was not the case. Some insurance companies covered behavioral health, some did not. And then if we have any old timers in the building, you remember where patients could almost stay as long as they needed to when they were hospitalized. Patients were in a hospital for 6 months, a year, however long it took for them to recover. And a lot of that has changed. The time is shorter. And that continues to be a problem as well. But in the past, it was even more difficult for people to get the services that they needed. Also, the type of services. So there was a distinction, and to some degree there still is, between the mental health of behavioral health and the substance use disorder of behavioral health, but it's all behavioral health. So those of us who work in the field, we see this all the time, the differences that's made between those two. And if we look at the organizations, just like the resources that Reggie mentioned, there's a lot more behavioral health services than there are substance abuse services in this city, in Milwaukee, and nationwide. But this is a time where it's needed the most. So there's the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act of 2008, deals with services that are covered, and that includes whether you're in network or out of network. Because what can also happen is someone like the situation that Brooks found himself in, that many people find themselves in, you go for services and they say, okay, yeah, we accept, a certain insurance company, but we're not in the network. We'll accept it, but we're not directly in the network. What that translates to is more out-of-pocket money. And this is the problem, because most people seeking services do not have hundreds of dollars, in a hospital setting, thousands of dollars to pay for treatment. So we hear stories, and some of us have experiences of, forging ahead, getting the money from somewhere, and having this huge bill that some people maybe today are still even paying for from when someone was in inpatient treatment, and it shouldn't be that way. So out-of-pocket fees, what's covered, what's not, and provider reimbursement. So provider reimbursement, I'm going to get into that a little deeper. Next, please. There's also some current research. So I didn't find much research on what's going on concerning mental health and substance abuse parity. But there was a report done in 2019 by Milliman, which is a private organization that has taken on, an active advocacy to monitor insurance companies, and they found that there's still a lot of disparity in spite of the act from 2008. Reimbursement rates for behavioral health providers were far below medical and surgical office visits. In 2017, primary care reimbursements were 23.8% higher than behavioral health reimbursements, and this was considered an increase from 2015, when it was only 20.8% higher. In 2017, for 11 states, reimbursement rates for primary care office visits were more than 50% higher than reimbursement rates for behavioral health office visits. So there's still some disparities, there's still some inequities. I definitely live for the moment, because I believe it will happen, because we will advocate for it, where behavioral health will be considered just as important as medical, physical health. It's all health related, and it should be covered the same way, and the same emphasis should be put on, and provider reimbursement should be the same. Next, please. So here's an example of states where the primary care providers' reimbursement is 50% or higher than behavioral health. So when I saw this, I was really, really surprised, especially that in New Hampshire, it's 80%. So their primary care, their medical providers receive a reimbursement rate that is 80% higher than what the behavioral health providers receive. And, to me, it really speaks of where we're putting our priorities, not considering that behavioral health is important. We say it, there's a lot of lip service, but then when it comes to the financials, it doesn't show up there. And note, I don't have it on this list, but Wisconsin's, specifically Wisconsin, right here, the primary care reimbursement rate is 45% higher than the behavioral health reimbursement rate. And when I talk about behavioral health reimbursement rate, I am talking about all different types of providers. Next slide, please. Here's some of the major insurance companies: United Healthcare, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Network Health, Humana, Children's Community Health Plan, WPS. There's many, many more, but these are some of the most common ones in Wisconsin. Next slide, please. So for the different providers, psychiatrists, which that is still related to the medical field. Psychiatrists have an MD. Advanced practice nurse practitioners. This is a growing field in Wisconsin, and I'm so excited about it because unfortunately we don't have a lot of psychiatrists in Wisconsin. Nationwide, we don't have enough psychiatrists. But advanced practice nurse practitioners with the mental health add-on are able to, if you didn't know, they are able to provide psychiatry services. They are able to do a psychiatric evaluation, and they are able to write prescriptions for medication. And thank goodness that this is growing in Wisconsin, because I don't know otherwise what people would do. The waiting lists are long. Also psychologists, PhD level, and then therapists at the master's level. So these are the typical rates, and a lot of these that I have listed, they're probably at the top of the scale. So if you look at these rates of what people are supposed to get, and I'm gonna zero in on therapy rates. For an initial evaluation, it's $179 an hour. Follow-up is $145 an hour, but I'm gonna show you what happens with reimbursement. Next slide, please. So a sample reimbursement, let's take a company such as United Healthcare. So the licensed clinical social worker or the licensed professional counselor, master's level individuals with an initial evaluation fee of $179 an hour as a standard fee all across the country. The insurance reimbursement could be $0 up to $88.60. So I know some people are shocked by that, right? And the $0 comes if the insurance company, especially for working people, so there's a Medicaid side of this, and then there's the commercial side of this. Speaking more on the commercial side, because the state Medicaid and Medicare side is set by the government, but on the commercial insurance side, that's where we see a lot of the variations and the differences. So what happens is, depending on where you work, the particular type of United Healthcare you have may require you to pay maybe like $66 or maybe all of the $88.60 for your first visit. So if you pay $88.60 for that visit, then the insurance company doesn't have to pay anything. And that's the type of insurance company that the insurance benefit that your organization was able to buy into. And there's different packages. And so this is a whole nother issue. Depending on where you work, your agency has the capacity to buy certain insurance packages that are affordable to them. And then there is some cost usually passed on to you. That creates a problem. And I know for a fact, as a provider, this is what keeps a lot of people from obtaining mental health care. It's expensive. It's expensive if you have to come up with $88.60 just for the initial appointment. And in the case that your co-payment is $66, then that means the insurance company has kicked in $22.60. So that's what the provider is getting, $22.60, and then the patient is required to do $88.60. Now, one thing I will say, all the providers in the room know that, we care about our clients, we care about our patients. If they come and they have this type of insurance and they are required to pay $88.60, they get a payment plan, they get some type of reduction, we work it out with them. Because, there is no way that we're going to let that person say, I can't afford this, and walk out the door. Now, everybody can't afford to do that. Dr. Amarante talked about her pro bono services. A lot of, especially clinicians of color and other clinicians, we do pro bono because it's a need for it. It's a need for it. Our number one objective is to, as we've been saying, help people heal, by whatever means necessary. However, everyone's not able to do that. Everyone's not able to do pro bono. If you think about an organization, it's very hard for organizations to survive and to continue to provide the services that they provide, doing it in a pro bono way. And that's why this issue is being brought up, because we must do something about it. We must advocate. Next slide, please. So let me tell you how behavioral health providers are dealing with this, besides the pro bono services. Some providers have been successful with requesting rate increases from insurance companies. Not many, but some. It's very hard to request a increase in reimbursement from an insurance company. You have to send a letter. You have to explain your demographic, your specialized services, you know, why this reimbursement, this higher reimbursement rate will benefit the clients. It's a lengthy process, and you still may be denied. But some providers have been successful with doing that. So that's one strategy. Keeping full-time employment somewhere else. So, you know, there's a shortage in the workforce, especially the workforce, as Dr. Amarante said, that looks like our clients. People of color, people of different ethnicities. There's a shortage. There is a grave shortage. Some people aren't able to actually afford to work in the field. And people who do work in the field, a lot of them do it part-time while they work full-time somewhere else. And that is a disadvantage for the people who need services. Adding on other services, so this is a creative function. A lot of behavioral health providers, they not only provide behavioral health services if they're doing it full-time, they also take on speaking engagements, they teach workshops, they, you know, do other creative things. They write books, you know, all to put the funding together so they can continue to provide behavioral health services. Accepting only private pay. So this is increasingly growing, which is very unfortunate. Private pay means the provider has decided to opt out of all insurance networks and only see people who can pay the $179 per hour or a sliding fee scale amount. So out of pocket, completely out of pocket. And we know that a lot of us and the clients that we serve cannot afford that. But it has come to that because what we have to look at is two sides of the coin, right? Providing services and a livable wage for the provider. And so some providers have decided in order for me to have a livable wage and provide services, I can't be in any insurance networks. And leaving the behavioral health field. Of course, this is the worst tragedy, leaving the behavioral health field. I have someone that I was mentoring recently that decided to leave the mental health field. They said, I have to do something else. This isn't working. You know, the reimbursement rate is too low. You know, sometimes clients don't come, of course, that happens, you know, with all services that you're providing, and it just was not sustainable. And this is the tragedy that we must prevent. So we have to come up with strategic ways to get the provider reimbursement rates equitable and still get the services equitable as well. Next, please. And that's the end of the presentation, unless we have time for any questions. Thank you.
Cool. All right, well, that was a great presentation. And I don't know about you, you definitely laid the clear out for us and it gave it to us in a way that we were able to digest it and understand it. And even though it may seem technical, right, I think it really shows, you know, really why we're here, right, to really look at resources and to look at the workforce and even see the challenges in the workforce, right, that, you know, even to the point of, you know, I remember when I walked into the mental health complex and, you know, as a 16 and 17-year-old, you're not thinking about reimbursement rates, right, but I saw the stress on my mom, right? I saw the stress that, she's like, hey, I want to give you help, but I also know I may need some help, right? And even though she didn't verbalize it, right, we look at it holistically, right, in the system. So definitely appreciate you for bringing it to light. And we do have a couple minutes for questions. I know online, we have a couple questions online, but if there's anybody in person that has a question for either Dr. Amarante or Thomasina as well, we'll have that opportunity for a couple minutes. Anybody in person that has any questions? Yep, if you can come to the mic. Both of you all.
Good morning. Excellent panel. I actually have two questions, one for Dr. Maria and Ms. Jenkins. In my previous life, I was a speech therapist for almost 25 years. And now doing the work that I do, I can totally relate about the disparity in reimbursement. And, you know, my comment on that is that we have to, as you talked about, people have to value this service. And it's a much needed service. And I hated fighting with insurance companies to, you know, say that the service that we're providing, and for me it was physical, occupational, and speech therapy, that, you know, it's a needed service. And all I saw were these continuous cuts in rates. And it's a travesty. And so we have to continue to fight because the mental health is such a need, and, you know, it's so important. And we have to show, you know, whether it's insurance companies or at the federal level, that the importance of the need for this service and that it needs to be reimbursed properly. And for Dr. Maria, I struggle because you are so right. There is such a need. How do we get individuals of different ethnicities and color to come into these professions to serve the people that we're working with? And, you know, obviously I'm a white male, and, you know, I do this work. I'm a foster parent, I'm an adoptive parent, you know, and I have a Latino child in my house, I have an African-American child in my house, and, you know, those are the populations that I work with. And, you know, how I'm looking for, you know, suggestions, because I'm also looking for resource sources for the youth that I work with. So right. Any feedback that people have, I would love to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. One of the things that comes to mind is the importance of telling your story. I remember when I was making the decision to pursue my doctorate degree, there were so many individuals telling me, you're from the inner city, you don't know anyone who went that pursued their doctorate degree, how are you going to do this? You don't have the funding. Only 3% of individuals who apply for a doctorate degree are accepted into doctorate programs. Just go out into the field and work a little longer. And then I remember the Paterson, New Jersey attitude that kicked in, like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. And proving them wrong cost me a lot. It cost me having to leave my family. It cost me having to deal with racism at a different level. And I remember looking for someone who looked like me. I wanted to find a Latina who could take me under her wing and tell me, it's okay, I got you. And I never found her. And I recognized that I was looking for the wrong thing. I was looking for this, and I really needed someone who spoke into my soul and who fed my dreams by teaching me how to navigate through. So to answer your question, how do we get individuals who look like me to pursue a career in mental health? I would say to those of us who are in this room, I want to call you to act. I want to invite you to go into the inner city, to have conversations, and go to the schools, have conversations with individuals in the community, and teach them, be a mentor. Mentorship is so powerful because it makes things real, right? So yes, I'm Dr. Maria Amarante here today sitting at this table. However, when I'm sitting with my people, I'm just Maria who struggled, and Maria who's going to give you the tools to navigate and pursue your dream. Maria who's going to be there, who's going to tough it out with you. Maria who cares about you. Maria who's going to answer the phone and who's not going to give up. Because I know the power of having just one person believe in you. I hope that answers the question.
Excuse me, I just wanted to chime in real quickly. I think, too, is that I know the question wasn't for me, is that we really need to get into the schools. We really need to talk to, we're addressing that on the Milwaukee County Mental Health Board, is that we need to get into the schools and start early. We need to decrease stigma. We need to let students know that this is a field that you can go into and have counselors not deter our children from going into certain professions, but to introduce these professions, like you say, and say that you can do this so you can start early. But with that as well, we need to decrease stigma around mental health because a lot of individuals don't understand it, so it's not a field that you think that you might want to go into. So we have to talk to the kids early in school. We have to get the teachers and the counselors to encourage students to go into this field, as well as a lot of different fields that students need encouragement, so we can start early and have resource fairs at the schools as well.
And I'd like to chime in very quickly, too. One of the things I hear from people a lot, and I always tell them that that's the wrong approach. People talk about creating welcoming spaces all the time. It's great to welcome someone into the space, but if you don't make that person feel like they belong, they're not going to stay, right? And so often, people from our communities that go into those spaces realize very quickly that they're not treated the way that they want to be treated, and they're going to get up and move out of that space and go somewhere else. People need to advocate for, very strongly, to have a belonging space where once you're in, you're there permanently, right? One of the biggest challenges I think organizations have isn't not just finding people of color, but keeping people of color is really hard, right? And part of the reason they don't keep them is because they don't listen. They don't listen. They don't have that humble attitude where they say, listen, tell us what can we do to make you feel as if you belong in this space. If you're not listening to those voices, you're not going to keep those people. When I was a little boy growing up in a little town in Mississippi around all of these older people in my family, including my great-grandparents who lived right next door to me, I heard them say this all the time. Boy, they gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Right? And I think people need to learn how to listen in these spaces in order to get people into those spaces and retain them. Become better listeners, please.
One thing I'd like to jump in and say too, and it kind of encompasses all of this, is I, and probably many of us, were first-generational students. So when you come from a community where there is a lot of mental health and addiction, and you answer that call and say, I want to be a change agent, I want to do something about this, and then you have to figure it out. You know, you have to figure out how to apply to the school. You have to figure out how to, like Dr. Amarante said, you have to figure out how to finance it because it costs money. And then when you're sitting in the classes, not every professor supports you. You know, so you have to fight through all these hurdles, all these obstacles, you know, but when you've been called to do it, you've been called to do it, and you can't go back. And that is why I answered the call to be a professor at UW-Milwaukee. You know, I really wasn't interested in the academia, you know, institution and all that brings, but it was a calling for the students. I'm only there for the students. And I knew that there would be some first-generational students of color just like me who every day in the program talked about quitting, and I can't let them quit. And so I do want to say this for our listening audience as well as those who are online. If you have a calling to come into this behavioral health field, believe that you can do it. And there are mentors. Yes, there needs to be more, but there are mentors, and we will help you, and we will guide you and support you.
Well, thank you. I have a couple of comments and requests. Dr. Jackson, Reggie stole my line. I was going to first ask about belonging, because inclusion gets done by the people that have the power. But we people of color want to be seen, want to be given a voice, want to be heard so that we can belong. And in that sense, thank you for being an ally that sees the color and then loves, regardless, and giving and loves because you see. So those were my comments. My question for Reggie, can we please have that list of 2 pages of resources, all of us?
Absolutely. We'll make sure that that list is available.
Thank you. And then I had the comment or question to Dr. Amaranti, but to Dr. Jenkins, did I hear you right that the crucial care for our communities that is the less expensive is the one that is the least reimbursed? And if that atrocity is true, how do we change it?
Right, that atrocity is 100% accurate. You know, with what's going on in behavioral health, impacted also by the pandemic and the opioid rates, this is the most critical time than ever that services need to be provided at a high level. And yes, it's, you know, there's a lot of lip service saying, we see that there's a problem, and yes, it's a problem, and yes, it's urgent, but the financial support is not there. So next time we're able to vote, whenever there's a bill, you know, in Congress to vote on, we need to be at the forefront. We can even advocate for bills to be introduced. So just like this Parity Act, obviously there isn't enough enforcement of that. So we can write letters, to Congress, we can write letters to senators and make demands that the Parity Act be followed. You know, so we have some outside organizations monitoring it and doing the advocacy, but we as individuals have the power to advocate. And then, so that's the government level, but then also with the insurance companies. Every state has an insurance commissioner. We can start contacting, and we definitely need to start contacting the Wisconsin Insurance Commissioner and report experiences that we're having with the insurance companies. We need to hold them accountable.
So that is at OCI.gov, I believe. The OCI is the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. That's how to access it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. We're right on time, so we'll have this last question, and then we'll kick it off for our last panelist.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody in person this morning. Love you all on that stage. So what I wanted to say is more or less a comment, just to kind of add to what has been said already. So I was just thinking about Harriet Tubman when she was like, when you hear the slave catchers keep running, when you hear the dogs keep running. So I'm a licensed professional counselor and a clinical substance abuse counselor, and I am a Black woman. And the reason why I bring this up is because of barriers. So transparency is, it took me 4 times until I passed the LPC exam. It wasn't easy. It was a very emotional transition for me to get there, not including trying to find a field placement that would take me, my hours, and my non-traditional student status. And then on top of that, each exam cost $275. Not including the $50 fees that I used to extend out dates that I could not make it. So to my point is, when you wonder why a lot of us are not in those spaces, is because it's very expensive and it's very emotional. And so I was talking to one of my community partners who's been in the field for a long time. He's an African-American male. And I happened to hear his presentation about a week ago, and just blown away by his story, because a lot of us have a backstory as how we got here and why we haven't given up. And I told him, you know, I am going to put time aside to make sure that he passes his exam. And because I'm a very assertive person, I really didn't give him a choice, but I did open the door for him to say, I'm going to support you and I'm going to push you. Because like myself, who he is very qualified, did not pass the exam 3 other times himself, and I told him how I was going to help him do it just like I did it. And so to that point is, when I was younger in the field, I remember there was a lot of competition amongst black workers in the human service field because the larger society forced us to compete against each other for that one spot. And now it's not different, much different, because a lot of us are cherry-picked. I can't say I'm grateful to be in some places, but I don't believe in leaving no man behind. So that's who I am, Harriet Tubman, in that way. And so I appreciate a lot of what was said today. I happen to know 4 of the 5 panelists very well up here, and they are all awesome. My only question to Maria is, I always knew you by Nina, so I don't know where the heck that came from. But there's greatness up here in so many fair fashions. And the thing that I do appreciate now is how white people are starting to take notice that you cannot do this alone.
Thank you.
Great. All right, now we got one quick question from online, and then we'll kick it right back to the panel.
I'm going to be really fast, I promise. This is for Dr. Amarante. You had mentioned doing some cultural competency trainings. Do you do them externally for outside partnerships as well?
I do.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right, great statements. And, I'm just taking notes, and I'm looking at Reggie's notes, and we're just kind of building on. And this is what the symposium is about. And I'd like to kick it off to our next and our final panelist for today, which will be speaking on training of police officers and first responders. So we'll have Captain Sharon Degrasse and Brenda Wesley to speak on this. But I'll read Captain Sharon Degrasse's bio. But before I go to the bio, I was super excited when I seen her part of the panel. I used to work at Safe and Sound as a District 5 youth organizer. So really worked side by side with MPD and District 5 and Harambe and the Imani neighborhood. So to see you here in the panel, just definitely want to thank you for being a part of it. Captain Sharon Degrasse is a proud Milwaukee native who grew up in the 53206 area and graduated from Hamilton High School. Captain Grant is the captain for District 5 in Milwaukee. She holds a master's degree in organizational leadership and quality and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, both from Marian University. She is a graduate of the International Associations of Chief of Police, Leadership in Police Organization, and has attended various FBI leader courses, as well as earning several training certificates in Northwestern's University School of Police Staff and Command graduate of Class 518. You're doing a lot. I love it. She is a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, IACP, and is a former president of the League of Martin. She believes that diversity in law enforcement is important. Therefore, she works to encourage more African Americans, other minorities, and women to join the law enforcement profession. So let's give it up for Captain Sharon Degrasse.
Thank you all. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you all for having me, and thank you, Brooks, for sharing your story this morning. So like Dr. A, she represents her city. I represent 53206 wherever I go. And anybody from 06 here? Okay. Okay. So I represent 53206 everywhere I go because that's where I'm from. And there are so many stereotypes about that neighborhood, and just to defy those stereotypes is a blessing. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you do, because the work that you do is extremely important. Now, I was voluntold to be here by my boss, but my boss doesn't know that growing up, I had depression. And so it's a great opportunity for me to be here and to listen to some of the information provided by the panelists today. And so the work that you all do is extremely important. I was about 13 years old, and I did not plan on telling this story, sharing my story, but just having depression, and for whatever reason, before I was 13, there was an individual that came to our school and provided a presentation about mental health. And I'm not sure who this clinician was, but they provided us with these cards for national suicide hotlines and gave us information and things of that nature. And I found myself at about 13 years of age calling that phone number and being able to talk to someone who talked me off of the ledge, off of suicide. And so the work that you do is extremely important because you don't know whose life you're impacting. And so that's the same information that I try to share to my officers. You don't know who you're coming in contact with, and you don't know how you can impact that person's life. And segue into my topic, which is training in law enforcement. So the Milwaukee Police Department, we have what's called the Crisis Intervention Team, so CIT. And that is something that I was, I guess I still am a member, but that's something that I volunteered to do or be a part of about 13 or 14 years ago. And when the agency provided that training, I thought it was a breath of fresh air, because prior to taking that training, I would interact with individuals who had mental health breakdowns and were in crisis. And sometimes leaving those individuals without having additional resources because we just didn't have them. Either you were a Chapter 51, suicidal, or a threat to yourselves or others, or unable to take care of yourself. So we would, Chapter 51 you at the mental health complex, or that was it. We didn't have any other resources. But after taking the crisis intervention training, it just opened my eyes. And that's what the agency provides to all of our officers. So resources, and of course, working with Ms. Wesley, who is an amazing instructor, an amazing person. Just learning, about bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and how to better meet people where they are and provide resources to them that we didn't have prior. And so the Milwaukee Police Department at that time offered, well, they still do, but at that time it was a 40-hour course in which individuals are able to meet with clinicians, actually hear them speaking, and going over different issues that people in our community share or have. And things have changed, and I know that you may get into that a little bit later, but things have changed as it relates to the training. So right now there's 16 hours that are provided from the state, and then an additional 32 hours provided by the Milwaukee Police Department to ensure that each recruit officer, prior to them actually getting out onto the street, that they have this training, that they understand the importance of active listening, trauma-informed care, and that they can actually interact with people and try to bring them down. Because when you are suffering from whatever it is that you're suffering from, sometimes you are not in the state that state that you would normally be in. And so training our officers so that they know how to interact with people who are suffering from crises is important, and that's what we're doing.
So just a little history on, Captain Grant was in our class, 13, 14 years ago. The history of CIT, Crisis Intervention Team Training, was brought into Milwaukee about in 2011 due to the death of an individual that was having a crisis that lost his life interacting with law enforcement. So that was brought up under the umbrella of NAMI Greater Milwaukee as well, and I was handed the job of facilitating CIT training through NAMI Greater Milwaukee when I was the Director of Education and Outreach, which it was handed off to me, I believe, in 2013. And so being a certified facilitator is that CIT, Crisis Intervention Team Training, was a voluntary program. It is evidence-based, and with the training is that they have found through research that there's less harm to the individual that may be in a crisis and less harm to law enforcement. The unfortunate thing is that because we do have Chapter 51, that law enforcement actually can take away a person's rights, which is through Chapter 51, and mandate and have them hospitalized at the Milwaukee County Mental Health Complex. The training is wonderful, but the philosophy of the training is to partner with community. Community has to be part of the training. Unfortunately, with the death of Dontre Hamilton, our mayor and the police chief mandated that all law enforcement officers receive this training. Unfortunately, I believe, and a lot of people in the mental health profession, and I think that when we talk about lobbying for certain things, I think that we should have came to the table and say, listen, law enforcement officers do need training in mental health, but the philosophy of CIT is a voluntary program, just like when law enforcement officers receive special training in SWAT, gun usage and all of that, that it should be a particular division of law enforcement officers that if there's a situation, you can call and ask for a CIT trained officer. And this is what we did when it was a voluntary program. Officers would get a certificate, they would get a pin, and then if they approached someone that was in a crisis, that when someone saw this pin, they would be like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I am going to be safe. And the reason with the CIT training is that correction should not be the first door to treatment. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals were taken to jail and not being hospitalized because law enforcement did not understand the philosophy of mental health. So with that being said, all law enforcement officers had to be trained in CIT, which again, the philosophy is that you have to want to understand about mental health. You have to be compassionate. You have to have empathy. And not saying that law enforcement officers don't, but there is a huge variety of law enforcement officers that think that the reason why I have this uniform on is to make people listen to what I have to say, but that's not community policing. That is not community policing. So we wanted to provide them the tools that was needed so people could get the help, but then not arrested. So a lot of the training now, I understand, is coming out of the police academy. With that being said, it should not come out of the police academy. It should be in partnership with community organizations the way that it was initially designed for. There is a CIT international agency. It is evidence-based. So we have to get it back to where it was. But we do need to train law enforcement officers in mental health. Now, when we started training as well, we didn't have trauma in the curriculum. We didn't have cultural sensitivity. We tried to put trauma and cultural sensitivity, and I don't like that word for some reason, so maybe I need to think of another one. Law enforcement officers pushed against that because they didn't want to understand communities of color. They didn't want to understand poverty. There were things that they did not want to understand, but now we're pushing the curriculum that we need this in there. We need trauma-informed care. We need to have officers to identify what is your bias. Again, when we talk about biases, what is your biases against communities? What is your biases against poverty? All of these things we have officers talk about, but another element that we added in the training was self-care, because a lot of law enforcement officers did not realize that they were depressed as well. They have PTSD. They are dealing with issues of trauma when they grew up. So we're asking law enforcement officers to oversee people that are living with these illnesses that may be in a crisis, but you haven't identified that you may be in a crisis. So we have added that in the curriculum, but I must say that they booted me out of the training because these are issues that I say that we have to talk about what's wrong so we can plug the hole to make things right. And so we need to continue to do that with law enforcement and with Captain Grant. And she volunteered to take CIT because she had the passion for community and the passion for community policing. And what can I do to help my community as well? So we need to bring it back out of the academy, partner with an agency, which is an agency that I have developed as far as training. But we need to have that community approach. And I want people to understand that you as providers as well, when you call on law enforcement, to ask for someone that is CIT trained, ask for an officer that is compassionate, because unfortunately what happens is that your clients may go to jail, and that enforces trauma, that enforces someone not being well. So you have to understand that if we do not cause harm to individuals, that they can do better in community, that they can recover, but we can't keep having this cycle of having individuals go into corrections and being handcuffed and taken to the hospital. And I say that mental health is the only illness in order to get help. And if there is an emergency, that you are taken in the back of a squad car in handcuffs. And what are we doing to help people in order to survive? So with that being said, we train all of MPD, we train all of West Dallas police officers. We also did training with correctional officers. Dr. Eileen Abrams and myself developed a curriculum that we traveled to all of the prisons to incorporate CIP, which is a shorter version of CIT that was developed by a legislator, Sandy Pash. And so I've done a lot of trainings in corrections with correctional officers. Probation and parole officers need this 40-hour curriculum as well, and mental health training. Again, so we need to get back to the fidelity of the training so we can do better with getting individuals the help that's needed. Because sometimes when a person is in crisis, you may need a law enforcement officers to come. Unfortunately, you may need that. We have something called the CART team that is a law enforcement officer that is partnered with a clinician. And then we have our mobile crisis teams that there's a social worker and a clinician. But what we're trying to establish now is a community response team as well. So we can train community to go out and assess and then call on law enforcement if that is needed, but we need that continued training as well. But I think that the CIT philosophy is great, but I think we really need to get back to the fidelity of what it was meant to be. But police officers do need training in mental health so they can understand what a crisis looks like. You may not even have a mental health disorder, but if you're going through a crisis, if you lost a loved one, and sometimes, you know, our emotions escalate, that we can't control our emotions if there are things that are happening in our lives, that they're able to assess that does this person need to be incarcerated, or does this person really need some help in order to get resources? And I don't know if the Academy is providing resources to the law enforcement officers, because again, if we have agencies and resources that we can pass people off to, then we have a better chance that people can recover.
Great,
Thank you,
great.
Captain.
Give it up. Training of police officers and first responders, right? It's everybody's job. Everybody has a part, everybody has a role, right? And it's great to hear of the CIT and CIP programs. And again, with my time as a youth organizer at Safe and Sound, we definitely push, right, of how the community can be a part of the process, right? And we know that police officers get a lot of slack. Oh, it's their problem, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, right? But when we look at this as a whole, especially as it relates to mental health, we're just really appreciative of you being part of this conversation as well. So how do we get here, right? We had the core conversations from last year in 2021 based off the virtual communications that has happened, right? And we came with the 4 themes of topics, from strengthening resources to diversity in workforce to the reimbursement rates and to the training of police officers. And we heard some great comments and questions, and there will be some time after our next presentation to go into breakout groups to further the conversations, right? And let's not forget that the theme of this symposium is a call to action, right? And to Mrs. Wesley's point, sometimes we have to lay out the problem, right? And I believe the panelists have beautifully laid the foundation of where we can build now. How can we build upon resources? How can we build now in terms of opening up doors of access to the workforce? How can we build on the foundation of understanding reimbursement rates and the systemic problems that they may come from there? And then lastly, how can we support our law enforcement and our first responders when they're in times of crisis? So again, I know when we look at resources, we think of Milwaukee and we know we're siloed. We know we have so many different parts over here, over here, over here. We're fighting for funds, we're fighting for clients, we're fighting for so much rather than working together. When I was sitting on the planning committee's meeting, right, this was kind of like the intersection, right? I know we're looking at the intersection of race and mental health, right? And let's kind of now look at this as an intersection of resources and everything that we've learned so far. So I would like to call up Dr. Rob Smith, and while Dr. Rob Smith is coming up to the podium, I'd like to read his quick bio. He's is the Harry G. John Professor of History and the Director of the Center for Urban Research, Teaching, and Outreach at Marquette University. His research and teaching interests include African American history, civil rights history, and exploring the intersections of race and law. So Dr. Rob Smith, he'll come and he'll discuss ecosystem mapping, which visually represents existing partnerships among Milwaukee nonprofits, government entities, and other resources, and how it can be used to map resources in Milwaukee. After Dr. Rob Smith comes with his presentation, we'll have opportunity to have a break for anyone who can use bathrooms. We'll have snacks and light snacks in the back if you like to refresh yourself. And then we'll have that super exciting opportunity to break out into breakout sessions. For those that are in person, as well as for those that are online, you'll have that opportunity as well. Without further ado, I'd like to give it over to Rob Smith.
I am in the unenviable position of being between your break and your breakout groups. So I'll be as efficient as I possibly can. But I do appreciate the opportunity to present this sort of shadow work that's happening that's very much connected to what our conversation includes today. And I want to first say that I'm not a mental health practitioner or professional, and I want to make sure that I say that very clearly. And I want to also add to that, but I am a part of a university that has a responsibility to this issue and many other issues. And so on behalf of Marquette University, if no one has done so thus far, thank you for being willing to have this conversation on our campus, and we welcome you here. And we're glad to be a part of this conversation in the various ways that we can be. I would imagine you're partnering with folks on campus in any number of ways. You're probably in conversation with folks at Marquette that I don't know about. And so, but I did want to just take a moment to say thank you for having this conversation here with us today. The conversation that we've had thus far tees this up perfectly. You've heard terms like synergizing resources. You've heard the importance of questioning silos. We've talked about representation. We've had very important conversations about the various roles that we can play in this broader conversation about mental health and mental health support. One of the things that I'd like to start with, though, is that I want to challenge us on the silos a little bit. I want to pick up where Reggie and others have talked about maybe that we do have some resources, and maybe we are somewhat resource benefited in a way that we can then, if we reframe things, we might be able to see some opportunities. The last couple of years, also I'm a Mac user, you know. I don't know what this archaic machine is up here that I'm supposed to be engaging with. You know, yep, yeah. There's that, boom, okay. Over the last couple of years, we know how difficult it's been. Thanks, Rich. We can't emphasize it enough, and we should not stop emphasizing the challenges. You know, we should remain very confident in being honest about what's been quite possibly the most difficult 2 or 3 years of all of our lives in various ways, at various moments, for all kinds of reasons associated with the pandemic and also all of the fringe-related challenges that came with it. You also probably heard language around this being an opportunity. you know? And that was probably hard to hear when we were struggling through some of the more difficult moments over the last several years. And what we saw also during that time was the remarkable courage, the remarkable spirit, the remarkable humanity of so many folks. You know, we saw something amid all the horrific realities, amid the vicious political polarization. We also saw something very human emerge out of so many folks. And so over the last several years, myself and Dr. Tim Ellinger, who directs the Institute for Systems Change and Peace Building over at UW-Milwaukee, we've been engaged in a number of projects. And part of what we do is think about the responsible place that university folks should play in these conversations. And we don't want to parachute into a conversation not understanding fully what our place ought to be in the ways that we can contribute to that conversation. And so, you know, I'm a historian. He's an evolutionary ecologist. This is interdisciplinary at its finest. You know, this is where you have multiple minds, multiple brains working on any number of questions or thoughts or concerns. And of course, because of the way that we seek to engage in these important issues, we know as university folks how valuable and how important our local expertise in and around Milwaukee is. You know, we understand that when we use the term interdisciplinary, we include everybody in the room here too. You know, it's not only those folks on our campuses that we're talking about. So as we engage these conversations around any number of rights-based issues, we do so with our university missions at our core, but also with our institute and our center's mission and values guiding us. And so we began to play with this notion of ecosystems, that we are actually, if we look across sectors, particularly if we start with grassroots folks first, we see that these ecosystems include a wide array of expertise, a wide array of resources that are not necessarily coordinated in the way that they could be. And so the siloing is there. It's very real. It's very challenging. But also, silos are really important because that's where we get to the depth of the expertise. That's where we get to the really rich core understanding of that one weed. You know how you talk about being in the weeds? Well, some of us are really good with that one weed, and that's really, really important. So let's begin to reframe our resources, our silos, our relationships in ways that thinks about how we are all connected. How do we impact each other even when we don't know that we're impacting each other? And so the ecosystem approach is what we're pitching and what we are working on in the shadows of this effort. Reg, I need that list too, along with everybody else. And so I'm going to talk to you very quickly about how we approach this thing called ecosystems. And what we have done is shaped an approach that we call the EVE approach. Really simple. It's what we already do. We're just taking a step back, doing a little bit of discerning, doing a little thinking to figure out how we can systematize some of the efforts that we're already engaged in to, first of all, can we give Brooks a round of applause today? Like, you are absolutely killing it this morning. Because you brought up the importance of synergizing. First, this is one of the first things you said this morning. You know, how do we synergize? And so part of what we're looking to do is use what we already know. Take what we're already good at, systematize it in a way so that we can synergize, so that we can be creative, so that we can engage the arts, because we also have to play a little bit. That's okay too. It's okay to do something that is important, that's significant, and also have fun with it. That's critical for brain development. That's critical for all kinds of reasons. And so we have a three-pronged approach, and I'll talk about it as three distinct sort of categories, but they're not. They're always in motion with one another. They're always in engagement, or in engagement with one another. Oftentimes, we start with an ecosystem mapping. We just want to know who's in the mix. And then we get into some important conversations, which you're going to do today. And then let's talk about where we connect and where we find one another across that ecosystem. And so when we think about ecosystem mapping, we're really asking one simple question, and that's who are we? And if we're going to ask another question in that mix, well, where do we fit? How do we fit in that broader community? Who are the stakeholders? That's a question I'm sure many of us ask all the time. I'm sure many of us have been in a scenario where we have an important event, and 2 weeks later, somebody has the same event. And you think, man, why couldn't I just catch them a couple of weeks before? Well, one of the reasons is because we don't oftentimes have the time to step back and actually do that ecosystem scan, to actually take that Excel sheet. It's really that simple, right? To take that Excel sheet and figure out all of the entities that are in the mix. And so that's one of the key components to this approach. Let's just make sure we know who's engaged, because then we can start to visualize. And there's something about visualizing. There's something about seeing yourself in something that helps to spur ideas. And then, of course, that helps us think about ways that we can then connect, and also helps us reframe what we mean by assets, resources, and stakeholders. So that's one key component of it, ecosystem mapping. But then let's also then at the same time, and through that process, we're going to do that here shortly, have values-driven dialogue. Not random conversations, not conversations that pit us against one another. Let's not jump right into thinking about programs yet. Let's not get right into the debates about funding just yet. Let's first talk about where we align, what brings us all together. We have far more in common than we have in opposition with one another. And this helps us to not only think about what's important, but it also allows us to think about how we participate, what we actually bring to a particular issue, question, or a set of conversations. We've all done it. We've chased that grant, right? It's like, man, we got to chase that grant. That's not exactly what we do, but we can do it because we need the support. Well, if we get into a values conversation, maybe we can avoid some of those pitfalls. If we stay in the realm of what's important to us, where our values direct us, and that then walks us down the path of emergent action. Once we've thought about where we are, who we are, what we're up to, once we think about, consider, recognize what's important, maybe then we can get into some emergent action that helps us think more critically and more creatively about partnering and collaborating, and then also making us much more aware of who we are and how we fit in that broader ecosystem. I did not exactly plan all of this. It just happens when you got the right people in the room that it falls into place for you. So we already have the attendee list. We already know who's here. We're going to take that Excel spreadsheet, add it to what Reggie has, and then begin to build that ecosystem mapping as we're engaging what we're up to now. In a few moments, you're going to get into your group discussions. You've already had this very rich conversation from our panelists, so we're already engaging in these important values-driven conversations. So this isn't new. The one thing that Tim and I talk about is we understand that the work that folks do requires their undivided attention. And we can't add more to someone else's plate. That would be irresponsible of us. And so part of what we're attempting to do is engage in this process, keep a process moving, offer some highlights, but certainly not make more work for folks. And when we have these kinds of, well, let me back up and say one thing. One thing that's been really important about Zoom meetings is that you can work during the meeting. Well, I'm just keeping an eye. I can't lie to a bunch of mental health folks. Like, I might lie at another event, but I'm not going to lie at this one. Look, I probably should have said that. We've got to get out of the habit of thinking that meetings mean that we're not working. Part of what's challenging about time is when we're not using our time as efficiently as we can. We have to just simply accept that we have to have more working meetings. And they should be convenings and conversations that maximize potential and maximize output. That 15, how many times have you done it? Where you're like, man, I got to meet with somebody, and you see them, and in 5 minutes you have a conversation and you're done. But our tendency is to put an hour meeting on the calendar. Somebody said, yeah. It's real, right? So let's get into the habit of having more working meetings, because our time is valuable, time is precious. And so we're role modeling that today, absolutely. And then in our future convenings, we'll report back not only how the mapping is shaping up, but then also what we're learning from our values-driven dialogues and ideas moving forward. How's my time, Brooks? How are we doing? Can I take, where are we at? Okay, give me a few more minutes. Thank you. All right, I want to give you an example. I'm going to throw a lot at you right now. All righty? I'm going to give you an example because I do think there's something important about the visualization as a conversation starter. The map is not the end all. The map is not the ending. The map is in some ways part of that triumvirate, but it's really a conversation starter more than an endpoint. A lot of times when we see something, we're like, oh, that's beautiful, and that's it. But no, this is the beginning. So I'm going to show you, if I can use this machine, I'm going to pop us out to one of our more complete approaches, more complete projects that use the EVE approach. And this is where we ask the same fundamental questions that we're asking today, but about resources and support in the Milwaukee region that are directed toward Black and Latino youth. And the question was, well, how are we supporting those young people? And the first thing we had to do is come to some understanding about who's in that ecosystem, who are the stakeholders. And we use this program called KUMU, K-U-M-U. And it's really useful because it allows you to make those diagrams and those reflections of your ecosystem, but it also allows you to build a presentation or other ways to share, communicate, and connect with one another. So we put together a presentation here. Veronica Manchino, Saul Lopez, our doctoral students on this project, knocked this out the park for us. So I want to make sure to shout them out because they in some ways helped us move forward with our thinking in a lot of ways. And so as we think about Milwaukee as an ecosystem of support services for Black and Latino youth, we moved into using this program. The program allows for us to do a couple of things. We get to create elements and tags. We can determine, 3 minutes, right on, that's all I need. It allows us to determine the type of organization and the type of relationships those organizations in that ecosystem have to one another. And of course, whenever you get into a computer program, you've got to learn how to use it, and it can be a little challenging. But this one allows us to keep some of this really simple, and it allows us to create these visualizations of these entities and these organizations. All right, so I'm just going to jump you into this really quickly, and I'm going to sit here for a second. I want you to just let your eyes adjust to that. Right, it's busy, ain't it? All right. Take your time with it. I got 2 more minutes. Now I'm going to zoom you in just a little bit. All right. So these are all of the organizations that we have earmarked thus far, the map's not done, that speak specifically to, in some way or another, issues with our young people, supporting our young people. These organizations can be connected, identified, using these various tags. All righty? See yourself there. But what really allows us to be creative and play with this, I'm just going to zoom in, and then I'm going to hover. So these organizations, if I hover over artists working in education, Trans Center for Youth, it shows us all of the connections that organization has. And then I'm going to do the same for Ubuntu research and evaluation. All right, yeah, talk about it. All righty. And then when I click on Ubuntu, it tells me what it does. All right, so this is the kind of mapping that we're going to create for our ecosystem here. Over the next several convenings, we'll report back your values-driven conversations, your breakout groups. We're going to get information from you about that. We're going to do a lot of this shadow work, and as we come back and reconvene, we're going to continually report how this ecosystem is looking, who's engaged, who's where, who's doing what, and then we're going to hand it right back over to you all to figure out what we do with that emergent action. We're going to do this shadow work first, so it doesn't take up your time. But we're going to come back to you on a regular basis to see what we learn about our ecosystem, how we can engage that ecosystem, and move to a place of emergent action in a way that is determined by the folks who make up the individuals at the forefront of the intersections of race and mental health here in our Milwaukee region. Thank you all very much for hearing me today. Enjoy your break.
Man, Dr. Rob, I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, man, at first I'm like, whoa, you talking about Mac, and that kind of looks archaic, but I really love it. I really love it. Just
I know it's a lot. I threw a lot at you right now, I know.
Yep, but just to see the connection, right? Just to see the connection, the more and more I was looking at it, it really showed the importance of we all have a part, right? We're here representing organizations, we're here representing families, but we're here because of ourselves, and this is why we're here. So, again, I just want to let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Let's give a round of applause for Dr. Smith as well, too. All right, some great breakout sessions. I had that opportunity to walk around and kind of do some ease dipping in the Kool-Aid and not knowing what the flavor is, but I really love what I've heard from so many different topics that we discussed today. Each group should have a individual that will report out on behalf of the group. Again, like I said, I would love. Yeah. All right, here we go. We're ready. Cool. So if I can have the four panelists either come to the front here just to kind of be partnered with their breakout group. But we'll start with strengthening resources to kind of give a 2-3 minute kind of summary, key takeaways and highlights that stem from your breakout group session.
Okay, we'll get started. So we had two components. We had the group that was here, and we also had an online component. So we're going to talk a little bit about each. So one of the things that came out of the group here is we talked about resources to add to the list of resources I mentioned earlier. So we had some great new additions to the list of resources that people gave a shout out to and told us a little about how that work was done. And then we talked about some of the challenges. We hear about the siloing. So we talked about some of the things. One point that I thought was a brilliant point is that, okay, there are resources, but people don't know what to do with those resources. They don't really know how to use those resources. That was one of the things. Obviously, competition instead of collaboration. This unacknowledged long-term trauma, right? Racial trauma that's taken place. One of the things we talked about. The difference between disability and mental health. There's a thin line between it. I don't think people necessarily know the difference. Was something we talked about. A community that someone talked about is really in need of much more resource and help. Those who have aged out of foster care and the mental health care that they are constantly asking about is something. And then, I don't think that we think about this, but when people have these challenges, they don't just go away. They're oftentimes something that they'll be dealing with their entire life. And sometimes you could find the help when you're younger, but when you get a little bit older, maybe that care isn't there. We had a member of the group that talked about the importance of us not forgetting about the need for our seniors to get the care that they need, to deal with all of the things that they've been dealing with. And then, obviously, we know funding will always be an issue. And then stigma in different communities, talking about mental health challenges. All of these things are things that I think are really important. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague who handled the online groups.
Thank you, Reggie. Okay, we had a rich conversation online. I want to highlight some of the things that were discussed that weren't also mentioned with the in-person group. First, we talked a little bit about solutions, good things that are already happening out there. Telehealth being available for people to access services a little bit easier. Specifically, 5 Point Neighborhood Association is offering training for seniors, probably for the general public and too, on how to use technology to access different resources, even has a Wi-Fi hub set up to help people get online. Providers helping people join virtual appointments. An awesome app by Mr. Kane, Montreal Kane, House Call Wisconsin is one that has a variety of resources available to support someone who's in any need when it comes to mental health services and gets them connected to loved ones and other things, so definitely check that out. Some of the funding available through the American Rescue Plan Act. There's some slight shift in how we're giving funding and focusing on community needs and including youth voice and people with lived experiences. We need to make sure that the community is part of that process, the decision making and the allocation of funds. The peer-to-peer programs happening in our community, just the number of people talking about mental health has definitely increased. That there's the focus, we continue to focus on breaking down stigma associated with mental health. We've done some progress and need to do more, and that alone will help increase our workforce. People will be interested in working in mental health if there's less stigma associated with it. The use of peer support specialists, and just this opportunity today was one of the successes highlighted. Likely, there's also a number of gaps, costs associated with many things, transportation, access to resources, the cost of technology to access those telehealth appointments, the need for more holistic evaluations. Again, a number of talk about seniors and the involvement of seniors came up in our group too, and support for them to feel like they can access the resources, and also support to give them so they can provide the kind of support they would like to their grandchildren. Access to mental health services in prisons was a huge gap that came up in our group, and some of the paperwork and barriers associated with serving that population. Silos was brought up, our need to create more hubs for people to access resources or highlight hubs that are already in existence, our employee shortages, broadening the definition of mental health, not just about treatment, but that mental health is something we all have, and the lack of racial diversity in our peer support specialists. And then just a little conversation about next steps. There's some great resources people mentioned that people could tap into. I'll make sure that that gets to Allison and gets shared out to you all afterwards. A little bit more about apps and organizations doing good work.
Cool. Let's give it up for our strengthening resources.
Thanks, Emily and Reggie.
All right, so we hear the next steps, we hear of the gaps, right, and how, and you would have heard this group going, there were so many organizations names being thrown out, and so many different perspectives to the whole pie of holistic resources. So if you have a moment before you all leave, go through, take a picture, right, and put it in your phones and further the conversation as well. Let's kick it over to diversity in the mental health workforce.
Yes, diversity in the mental health workforce. Lakita led this discussion, but I am going to present for our group. We talked a lot about how important this is so that we can continue to be really impactful in the community. Without the diversity in the workforce, that's just not going to happen. So I will ask you all, before I even say anything, if you search yourself, search your heart and your soul for how you have an allowance for diversity in the workforce. Are you kind when people come in? Are you helping to train or onboard? Do you feel threatened by somebody's cultural difference or sexual orientation or how they identify? If that's the case, then maybe we need to be working with you to get you some help so that that congruence can take place. It's okay. We all have work to do. I have work in many areas. But if you find yourself feeling threatened when diversity enters the workforce, then you need to probably work on that issue. One of the things we talked about was the positive procedures in terms of interviewing and training and onboarding. Sometimes systems and processes need to be shifted or changed or updated, right? Because they're archaic or old or not the way that the world is moving. We need to integrate more multicultural techniques and strategies, utilizing the DSM-5 or methods that we might have learned in school. Some of the students that were in our group really mentioned how they learn a certain way and then they're expected to come out into the community and output what maybe somebody who's no longer with us or living amongst us had created maybe in the early 1900s or something. And that's ridiculous. We have therapists that are actually doing current research and work and devising techniques and protocols that help aid all folks, right? Create allies. At my previous position at another place, they started an ally group. And so that ally group is not for people of color. Black and brown folks and other folks don't need to be in those groups because we've had to be allies in order to live, in order to survive, in order to be on the planet. We've had to have allyships and relationships with white folks. We need ally groups to come together and do their own work without the advice of black and brown people. Do your own research. Figure out what you need to work on your own, and then come back and then create policies and techniques and onboarding process that help make the mental health workforce more diverse. Shifting of policy, read policy procedures written into the agency, take healing to the community. One of the things I mentioned, a short plug, I'm Simone from the Office of Violence Prevention, and I do manage a federal funded grant where we do take money into the community and we do deploy mental health therapists to the community after someone has experienced trauma or stress. We do not expect people to come to us. Trauma survivors are having a difficult enough time just waking up. So coming into the mental health space on a regular basis, on a regular appointment, might not look the same for somebody who has stability and safety and access and resources. For many of the folks that I serve, the stability is not in place. The safety is not in place. And so we take things out into the community. And that's also how you can create a diverse mental health workforce, because we are diversifying our services and what they look like. More telehealth services. One of our other young ladies mentioned how that's been very beneficial for her practice, because that's a way to diversify services as well and meet the needs of more diverse people, those that feel really affected by COVID and still don't want to come out, or those that don't have access to where you're at. Cultivate a workforce that represents all of Milwaukee. This lady from Wraparound talked about what they're doing at Wraparound Milwaukee to diversify their workspace, dismantle barriers that don't provide access to resources and support. So dismantle barriers, that means break them down. Do y'all know what dismantle is? Take apart, get rid of, throw away. Just in case. Some of us want to say dismantle and we just move stuff over to the side. I'm talking about absolutely dismantle it. Moving services to neighborhood behavioral help in the community, therapy for Black girls as a resource app that folks would find. And then we mentioned Black Clinicians of Milwaukee, which I'm also a part of, and Thomasina, one of the panelists today, is one of the co-founding members. So that's also a way to diversify the workforce. Go to places, network, find out who in the community is doing stuff with other professionals and figure out how to get them in, whether it is a speaking engagement, a training that you might need, some consulting work that you might need done. There are therapists, like Thomasina mentioned, that are working full-time jobs in the community, but they also do things on the side to supplement their income. But for some of us, many of us, yes, I like to supplement my income, I do. But what I'm really called to do is to serve. And I'm clear about it. So one of the things we talked about in this group is to be really mindful of why you got into the field. If you get frustrated, if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like you're not being treated fairly, we've all felt that. And especially Black clinicians, we've definitely felt that in many institutions. But what you have to do is keep striving on. How do we do that? Create a network where we can support each other. Connect to resources is the second part of what we were asked to discuss. Incoming clinicians need mentors. Definitely, I'm a mentor. Call me, text me, come to my house, whatever. What happens when clinicians burn out, especially women of color, like Terry Elsie mentioned? We struggle, not just with the test, not just with state mandates, not just with programming, but with being heard and respected at the same time. Go figure. We work in the mental health profession, but we decide not to respect specific type of people. If you're dealing with that, you need to search yourself. One of the things we need to do is share information with universities and colleges about how they can diversify not just what they're teaching. Oh, help us. I've taught at a couple of them. What we're teaching, but also how we attract students of color into the classrooms, into the field. And then once we get them there, are we treating them fairly? Are we taking their suggestions into consideration? Are we implementing them into the classroom or the projects or the syllabus or the curriculum? What are we doing? Make tests more affordable, state tests more affordable. We understand standardized testing is not for everybody. We understand it can be very difficult. I am tired of hearing how many people talk about how they've had to take that test several times, and it is not anything to do with Terry or Simone or anybody else. It has everything to do with the way that the test is written, and it is not written in the favor of black and brown people, and that will never, that's what I'm saying today, and that's what I'll say to anybody. We know it's difficult, so we have to train, we have to learn, we have to study, but we also have to study around how it was devised to keep us out. Do you understand? That's a major barrier that we know institutions and programs and systems have been designed for Simone not to be there. And I still stand. So I'm already winning today because I'm still here. But the idea is that we have to fight too hard for it. So it's taxing. So one young lady I met today said I'm in the mental health field, but I left for a while because it was taxing, and she's young. So I'm her mentor now. Hi, mentee. Yeah. So yeah, grants, we need grants. We need to take the dollars to uplift smaller organizations. Lakita mentioned how the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, as an example, utilizes its funding and its dollars to connect to smaller agencies, but also provide money, but also the technical support that they need down the road. Office of Violence Prevention, we are not a direct service provider, but what we do is that we have funding through grants where we latch on to organizations in the community and we support them, not just with dollars, but support longevity. How do they send us their reports? How do they figure out what to do next? What are the next steps? Who do they need to be collaborating with so that these services are spread out? And we support many agencies through those dollars. Am I good, Keita? Faith-based community and organizations is a way to connect resources. Vanisha Hendricks held up our faith-based initiative for Office of Violence Prevention. And just watching her, I've learned so much about how to collaborate and work with many different faiths in this community and get them all to come together to talk about the importance of healing in this community. We cannot do it alone. We cannot do it just with the mental health professionals. We collaborate with MPD and the fire department and schools and all hospitals and any agency that we can collect. All my meetings have 9 million people on them, but they all from somewhere, right? And so we all are moving towards these conversations around healing, but the faith-based organizations oftentimes have the ear and the heart of their parishioners or folks in their community. And if a leader of any faith or any organization is out front saying to people in the community that we love you and we care about you and we want to offer up resources and information, if the leader is out there, folks will follow. I feel like if you have a calling, then what you doing with it? That's what I ask all the time to myself. And move away in outreach. Move away from in-reach and more outreach is what we say. Be out and be visible in the community because it's necessary.
That's a really tough act to follow. I can give my time up to the next group if we're taking too much time. She covered most of it.
Cool. Let's give it up. Let's give it up for diversity and mental health workforce. So we got about 10 more minutes, but we're connecting the dots, right? We're getting to the action, right? We see the resources, we see filling the gaps and the solutions. We see how the workforce can either stand and how we can strengthen the mental health workforce. But without further ado, I want to kick it over to hear from the reimbursement rates of how, whatever perspectives may have came out of those conversations.
I need to move.
Oh, okay. I was just making sure that we're positioned correctly. So Ms. Dossett and I are going to, she's going to present information. We're going to see how it interconnects with the online audience and the in-person group. So the online audience did a better job of talking about, you know, what are some of the positive things. We just went in for the kill in terms of what we need to do to make changes. So from our online group, they said when clinicians and families connect, there is progress. Absolutely. Yay, that's our win. And we did have somebody in the group tell a story, which kind of, you know, satisfy both ends. It was a win, but then it also showed a disparity of how a person with high income had a successful treatment and recovery plan. But income was the factor, and everybody doesn't have access to the thousands of dollars for a long-term inpatient treatment. But it's an indication that given the right amount of time, treatment can happen, the person's needs can be fully served. But we've got to do something about that financial piece, of course. Workforce shortages led to creativity, broadening individual skill sets, skilling up. And what does that?
It says to meet more need.
Oh, okay. To meet more need when connecting. So, right, it kind of put the pressure on clinicians to skill up and come with more specialties to meet the needs, just like telehealth. You know, a lot of people, and that's my story. As a clinician, I said, you know, I really want to provide services online because I had a client who had to have knee surgery. And my office at that time, it was on a second floor anyway, so that was challenging, and there was no elevator, unfortunately, in the building. But she had to literally stop seeing me because she had knee surgery. And at that time, I didn't know anything about doing telehealth, whether it was legal, whether it be reimbursed, which at that time, it wouldn't have been, not the way we do it now. But telehealth really caused us to rise up in order to meet the needs during the pandemic. While waiting for services, we saw that kids and parents found things to do while they were waiting, involved in pro-social activities, art and music therapy. And then, again, the virtual treatment. So those were some of the positive occurrences that has happened in spite of the disparities in reimbursement. And then our online group talked about reducing the wait time for services. That is issue 2, but that's related to the workforce, of course, the shortages. Not enough providers, longer wait time to see the existing providers. Concern about the symptoms, manifestations of mental illness and testing that's not covered or cost prohibitive. So that's something to address. Fewer resources in the inner city communities, driven by outlying areas not accepting Medicaid or limiting Medicaid patients. You want to talk more about that?
Yeah. Actually, first I have to thank the virtual participants who were wonderful in having a conversation with me. Thank you so much. Hopefully you're still online and with us, and that I'm capturing everything that we talked about. But I added one thing here that really stood out to me, and that is the few resources or few adequate resources that we have with availability in our center city communities. So this is really driven by those in outlying areas, clinics in outlying areas that don't accept Medicaid participants, or they limit the number of Medicaid participants. They take insurance and private pay, and so that drives anyone who needs Medicaid service into some of the smaller inner city clinics, which are wonderful, but become overwhelmed. You can only accept so many patients at a time with the limited resources, so then you end up with waits of 12 months or more. So that is really very problematic. And then the clinics, even if there is some access in the outerlying areas, and if they're one of the lucky ones who can get in as a Medicaid patient, the feeling of being welcoming, you know, is that going to occur with people of color, or are people going to begin to say, well, you know, I'm just not going to bother. I'm going to just wait as long as I need to for a welcoming place to be.
So one comment I'd like to add for our in-person group, we got to the point where we said we need to make sure that the system requires all providers to accept Medicaid. Why should any providers have the ability to say, I will accept only these clients and not those? So that's one thing we came up with. And then action opportunities.
Action opportunities, writing to senators, especially now with the state budget process, pushing for higher reimbursement. There are new federal funds, so get out, write for grants. If you're not sure where to begin, you can do just a web search for grants, or do check the websites of Health and Human Services, Workforce Development, Department of Children and Families. And when you see a contact person, please do just call them. Pick up the phone and call them. They want to utilize those funds in the best way possible. And talking with coworkers and writing as a team is something that you can do as a team in an organization. Next steps, some of what happened already today, doing the mapping and creatively connecting with other like-minded individuals to do some brainstorming of potential collaborative actions.
And one resource I would like to put out there, and this is one thing I do with my students a lot, we definitely talk about advocacy in a lot of different areas. It's one of the fundamental principles in social work. And so I have them actually identify, and we all should do this, identify who's your alderman, know who the governor is, hopefully you already know, but what is on the governor's agenda? We should know that. Who are our senators, you know, in legislation that we should talk to, that we should write, that we should call? If you Google the current assembly bills, you know, the current bills in Senate, they will be listed. So whenever you see something pertaining to mental health there, find out who's behind the bill, of course, who introduced it into Senate, and find out the status of it. Find out if you can comment on it. Even if a bill is not in Senate, you know, work together, as Ms. Dossett said, work together, because it may be overwhelming individually, and as a team, introduce something. You know, ask for the senator or alderperson, whoever applies for that particular legislation, ask them to introduce it into government. So bills are created all the time, and a lot of times they're created from the feedback of the community. So we do have that power. For Medicaid and Medicare, those are government funded, and just like the online audience said, advocating for increased rates. So the next time some legislation is out, and the current legislation that talks about funding, every time we have a budget in Wisconsin, you know, what does the budget say? How much money is being allocated to mental health? We should be all over that. We have a right to say something about it. We were also talking about that we should have provider meetings. We should definitely try to create a system where we have monthly provider meetings. So as providers within the mental health system, we can talk about what's going on, our shared experiences and strategies. And we even talked about, you know, developing a new system and holding the current system accountable. So strategizing what's a new system we can develop. Maybe the new system would lean more on grant funding and nonprofit collaboration. And then holding the current insurance system accountable, that would be contacting the Office of Insurance Commissions here in Wisconsin, oci.wi.gov. If you go on that website, oci.wi.gov, it has a lot of information about the insurance process, some of the things I shared today and more. And then it also talks about how things are supposed to be done and how they're regulated, and the complaint process. When we see the insurance process not being handled correctly, we need to say something. And then last of all, We did talk about the two organizations that are monitoring the Parity Act, Milliman, independent third-party organization, as well as the U.S. Department of Labor. Definitely go online and read those reports. The U.S. Department of Labor monitoring of the Parity Act. It's a very long document, very in-depth, but it will let you know that even in 2022, they did some monitoring and still found that the Parity Act still isn't being fully implemented and followed. And let's ask for full disclosure. Maybe this is something that the Insurance Commission could help us with. We want to ask full disclosure from the insurance companies about their rates. It's very difficult to find out what the rates are. Even as a provider, if you're not contracted with a particular insurance company, you won't know what their rates are. They only give a contract out to the providers in their network, and then they tell you, what rate they will offer you. But let's have full disclosure of all the insurance companies of their rates. That will not only help consumers know what's going on, but also it will let providers know, where the equity is and where the disparities are. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I love it. All right, so we heard from strengthening resources, we've heard from the diversity in the mental health workforce, the disparities of reimbursement, but last but not least, to end our panel discussion, or not our panel discussion, our breakout discussion, I want to kick it over to you all to discuss trainings of police officers and law enforcement.
So the online and the in-person went in different directions, and it's really quite beautiful because the online did kind of a circle around what it is that the in-person group did. What we looked at online was what can we be doing? What actions can we take based on some examples of things that other communities or are happening in our community in a small scale. So the first one is about building relationships between the community and the police, and what can we do? We don't have to wait to be invited in. And so examples are Coral Centro, some of the work that they're doing with District 2, relationships with the Latino community. Another example is Owens Place, is inviting new police come in and spend time with the youth at Owens Place who live with mental health challenges. So they're building relationships. That's just a part of the practice. One of the churches that coordinates monthly meetings between police and the people that surround the church to be able to build those relationships and take issues, listen, learn from in two-way conversations. So things that we all could do. Think about what you're a part of and how could you be reaching out to help with those building of relationships. The second area was an example from Illinois of where they have case managers housed at police departments. And so they're actually charged with being involved in situations, but also following up over time as case managers would to be sure that people are getting the resources that they need. A third example of things that we could do is to think about when we think about healthcare and the burnout that's experienced in healthcare, our response is how do we help people within healthcare to care for themselves? How do we create environments that they work in that are positive for individual well-being and create a atmosphere of compassion? Again, Coral Centro brought up, all the wonderful practices that they do around well-being for the community could be targeted to the very police that it is that they're working with. So again, that two-way relationship of if we all as healthcare providers need to be supporting our well-being at this time, how can we help do that in partnership with some of the police that we're connected with? So the compassion resilience work was brought up. There's lots of different programs that we can be thinking about bringing to police. And then fourth, Prevent Suicide Greater Milwaukee in partnership with the Office of Violence Prevention, doing suicide training for police and helping them to get access to tools to assess people that they're interacting with. And they have a specific focus this year on BIPOC youth and suicide and police understanding the recent rise in those rates. So again, thinking about the work that we do and how do we involve and engage police. And then the fifth area really is going to be a transition over to what the in-person group did, was of course to increase CIT, but we really were asking the question of what kind of follow-up support is given after someone goes through CIT, what kind of expectations, what kind of policy changes are made based on the philosophy of CIT. That's something we as community members can be asking about those policies. And then, of course, anytime you train someone, we sit and get a lot of information over a period of time, who's helping to coach and support police to put those maybe differing viewpoints than they've experienced before into action and then hold them accountable. That was online.
And in person, I do have to say that with CIT training, which is a 40-hour curriculum, is that within that curriculum, the way that it was before is that there was suicide training within that. There was trauma-informed care within that training. And also law enforcement officers had to go out and do site visits. I know with the pandemic, I'm not quite sure if they're doing that now, but that was part of the training, that you had to go into these various organizations to establish relationships to, and then introduce yourself, but to find out the good work that was being done. So with crisis intervention team training, of course, we're not quite sure what is happening now because, again, community is not involved, but I know that the police department is looking at their standard operating procedures and changing that on how to use effective techniques with people that live with a mental health disorder. My understanding is that we did have a mobile crisis team that was specifically for, was it the developmentally aging population, but I think that has been absorbed up under the crisis team that currently exists now. But with that being said and then we also have the CART team, which is a crisis assessment response team, which is combined again with a law enforcement officer and a clinician. The mobile crisis team is combined with a clinician and a social worker, but there is discussion on a community response team. And then having within the community response team is to have family navigators part of that team, to have community health workers. And one that we haven't talked very much about is peers. Those with lived experience, is that I think that they should be at every table to use their experience, but sometimes those that carry the degrees do not want the peers, or they don't have a voice at this table, but we know that experience and living with a mental health disorder carries a lot of weight as well. So, and then additional training for responders as well, which would be CIP training. And then I think, then I'll have Martina just come up and talk a little bit about a new initiative. Yes, tell me about this new initiative, because I think you would do a better overview.
She made me write, now she's making me talk. One of the suggestions was, how do police officers know when they make a referral, how do they close the loop? And there is a new resource in the community, Unite Us, which is in partnership with Impact. And I know there's, mixed feelings about 211 and Impact, but this merger is really, it's a unique opportunity for all of us to be part of a network that could inform the work that police do by, when they make a referral to MHA, for example, they have an opportunity to see that the referral was received, right? So they don't have any access to that person's mental health treatment or assessment, but just to know that they made a referral, it was received, and this person is now within the folds of that referral that they made. Right now, there's currently no way for police officers to have that kind of feedback from the community. It could be for food, it could be for clothing, it could be for shelter. And so we're just wondering if Unite Us and the Impact merger might be an opportunity for police officers to have training about how this network works and be able to utilize it in their work.
And I think that's why they're looking at the new SOP, so they can determine how to get additional information and collateral information that's needed to help individuals. But again, we talked about how do we make those connections, because again, I think a lot of organizations and people are working in different silos. There's a lot of different things going on. So how do we make those connections with the various organizations as well? And then, of course, what was that? And then another thing that we talked about is that different municipalities have different ways that they have and they use their SOPs as well. And so how do we make that connection where we can bring the different municipalities together and have the higher ups like your captains and the chief of police to come to the tables so we can determine how we can bridge these gaps as well when we are having law enforcement go out and they're the first responders when there is a crisis situation. Oh, no one knows what an SOP is. That's standard operation procedures that all police officers have to follow. And that's not just with mental health, but it's a standard operation that all police officers have to follow, a guideline. So this one addresses, which is 160, that deals with those that are living with a mental health disorder. So I think the primary thing that we talked about is the silos and how do we get to one table so we can plug these gaps that we have. Thank you.
Great, great. Let's give another round of applause for all the breakout groups. Those that talk in person and those also virtually. So we heard of solutions, right? We've heard of gaps that we can fill as well. Next steps. I think everybody has that individual, I like that word, calling, right? That individual calling that if you didn't know what it was before you got into the place today, hopefully you have it, right? And you know, this is why we're here. This is why the symposium was designed. This is why it was planned off the meetings from 2021, right? Is to get and to start to be able to do the call of action, right? So let me see those green folders. Everybody got your green folders real quick? Let me see your green folders, green folders. I feel like I'm in church real quick. Put your Bibles up, Make sure y'all hear the Bibles, right? All right, cool. So we have a cool call to action piece, right? One, just to hold ourselves accountable, right? Sometimes we gotta write it, to plan it, right? If it's not clear, then the vision won't really happen, right? So we have this own sheet that you can put your name and email, right? And then you put your plan of action. What are you going to do, right? We sat here, we've heard about resources, we've heard about the workforce, we've heard about disparity rates, we've heard about police officers and their role into this solution, right? But where you are either representing an organization, where you are either representing as an individual, as your family, right? What is your piece of action in this whole pie if you look at it, right? I think about even while we're here, right? We look at the word coalition, an alliance or for combined action, a group of two or more formed to work together in partnership to achieve a common goal, right? So if you look at your sheet, you see your plan of action, you see your next steps, and definitely appreciative and thank you all and the facilitators for each group to lay out some action steps, right? If you didn't know what to do, here goes this, or reach out to your governor, or send over your resources and your organizations to this list so we can have the synchronized resources, right? What's your part? What's your part? What are your next steps, right? But what I love about coalition and what I love about the symposium is that we can't do it alone, right? We all are only strong as each other. And when we hear the word silo, we hear the words resources, and Reggie says he's gonna take resources, right? And we figure out how can we all come together in partnership, in true partnership, right? Are we leveraging resources? Are we leveraging conversations? Are we furthering conversations that may have started today, right? This is the cool part of the worksheet, the worksheet where you have an opportunity to name an individual that you either met here today. You may have an individual in your mind that should have been in this space. This is the perfect time to place them and their email here, right? And you may ask, like, why? Like, why? I'm gonna get a business card, put it in my back pocket, and just continue to go throughout my day, right? But we also want to make sure that the partnership is accountable as well, too, right? So if I meet with Reggie Jackson and I put on my next step, our next step is to really look at the list, right? And to really take it apart, really looking at the ecosystem map and figuring out where I'm a part of, right? And to have that eyes and the ears open to gaps, to fill in those gaps, right? That may be my next step. But then I may tap into Sue Dicks, right? And figure out like, oh, you know what? I need Rogers also here as well to give me a more clear perspective on what we can do. Once you put those partnerships and the next steps in, got a nice little reward. Everybody loves rewards, right? So if you take a picture of this form filled out today before you leave, in the hallway or on the desk back, you'll have an opportunity for a gift card to these 3 businesses listed right here, 3 local coffee shops. And again, we know, and again, I'm still thinking about the word calling, right? Even though the gift cards may be a great incentive, the outcome, the benefits of organizations coming together, of individuals coming together to do the true partnership, to provide resources, support for those that are dealing with mental health challenges, all right? And we would love to keep track of these, right? So if you send them over, and I know we're going to be coordinating a lot of the follow-ups and the next steps to really synchronize everything together, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you, and Wise has their email here as well, but feel free to take a selfie with it, right? I know we have time after the symposium to connect and network and further our conversations as well. I'm encouraging you all to take selfies and use the hashtag one story at a time while you're doing it as well to show that we had a great time today at the symposium. But to remember that it's a call to action, right? In 2021, one of the main takeaways is that we're done talking. We can have a symposium in 2 months and pretty much have the same topics and new things may arise, right? Or new values or new gaps may come to surface that we may have not talked about today. But we're experts, right? We're experts in the place and we've been positioned to really lead the call of action. So now we're in the place of action. Now we have the partners listed. Now we're informed. Now we know of the resources that are all around. So the question I asked, what are we going to do, right? In the same way that I started with my story in the simple way of healing from our past, growing into our purpose, and leading with love. Everybody say heal. Heal. Everybody say heal. Heal. So you can't spell health without heal. And if we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about emotional health, and we're talking about behavioral health, the focus on healing, healing-centered services, healing-centered therapy, healing is the transition of where our action needs to be. Everybody say grow. Grow. Everybody say grow. Grow. We talked about purpose. We talked about calling all today. The question that I ask you is, do you know your purpose? Do you know why you're here? If you don't know why you're here, look around. You have a support system, and you don't have to do it by yourself. Tap into another organization. Tap into a mentor. Tap in even to your own personal story. It's because once you can understand your calling story, once you can understand your calling journey, then you'll be perfectly positioned to be right where you need to be. And lastly, everybody say lead. Come on now, everybody say lead. I didn't say leave, I said lead. Everybody say lead. All right, now we just have to lead with love. Lead with love, right? And these are the values that help push our organizations forward. These are the values that help push our city forward. These are the values that help us to make that call to action. So the question I asked before the symposium is, what's your definition of love? If you didn't have an answer then, I ask you that same question now. What is your definition of love? And if we can form that in the way of action to say, where are you going to love? Where are you going to spread your love? Where are you going to intertwine love into your organization, into your families, into your individual lives? It starts with you. It starts with you. So on behalf of WISE, on behalf of Rogers, on behalf of the planning committee and all those that came together to put this symposium together, I definitely want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being engaged. This is what it's all about. Again, go on social media. You have time after the symposium to network, take pictures, right? Show everybody that this is the place that they were meant to be. And also that they have a place in this world. They have a place in our healing-centered initiatives. Quick announcements before we leave. On the back in the room, we have box lunches that are for you. You have the opportunity to either, if you would like to take the box lunch and go into your homes, into your road, onto the road, you can definitely have that opportunity. But if you'd like to further the conversation, the room is still open for us to continue to talk, right? As you can see around the room, there's different Post-it notes. I encourage you all to take a photo of each one. Keep them in your phone and kind of have that to also help further the conversation as well. But before we leave, I know we all have our name tags, and I'm seeing a lot of names, but I just kind of wanted to give an opportunity to rep out our organizations that we have here. I see OVP in the building. What's up, OVP? Let's give it up for OVP. I see my friend Benji and GMF in the building. How you doing, Benj? Anybody else? Let's name our organizations out. MHA, let's go. Let's give it up. Let's give it up. Anybody else? Anybody else? Who else we got in here? Who else we got?
National Alliance for Mentally Ill.
Let's go. Let's give it up. Let's give it up. Anybody else? Let's go. Let's go. Raising the roof. I haven't raised the roof in a couple years. Let's go. Here we go. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Mental Health Task Force.
Mental Health Task Force in the building. Let's get it. Let's get it. Anybody else? Miracle. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get it. Let's get it. Anybody else? You said what? One Stop Consulting. Let's give it up for One Stop Consulting. Black Clinicians Milwaukee. Let's go. And I know for those that are online, if you're listening, please feel free to throw your name in the chat. But again, we're appreciative of having you all here. Starting early, and now we're at lunchtime, and the Symposium is officially over. So again, thank you all for being here with us again. Feel free to go to the back to get your box lunches. And again, thank you all again.
Great job.